The companies that are making these, big pharma, these are the fertilizer companies. These are the toxic companies, the ones that make paints and perfumes that are coming out with these remedies to the things that they actually put into us that cause the problem. So this is the arsonist calling the fire department and getting the medal for putting out the fire.
Welcome, everybody, to the Warrior Podcast. Today's guest, I can't wait to tell you how we met. His name is Jeffrey Adam. He is the founder of Micronic Silver. He is definitely a warrior for Jesus Christ. He's right in my wheelhouse. And with that said, Jeffrey Adam, thank you for joining the Warrior Podcast today.
Well, thank you, Frank, for inviting me. I know we've had a hard time connecting because I'm so busy all the time, and I have some people that come up that I just have to answer to, and I know we canceled on you the first time, so it was really important.
Yeah, no problem. When you have purpose, that's what life is all about. So, I mean, you're busy, you have purpose, and that's okay. So I want to tell the people how we met. We were both walking into a seminar held by Dr. Judy Mikovits, who you and I were walking in together.
Yeah, the one in Batavia, Illinois, a couple months ago.
And you had this very cool leather jacket on. And I said, hey, nice jacket. You go, yeah, I hear that all the time. And we had a quick dialogue. We walked inside. And then at the end of the seminar, I was waiting for Dr. Judy to finish because we were all going to meet at a common place, and I got to sit with her for 4 hours, which was amazing. Somebody standing next to you at the door said, hey, you're the silver guy. And that started a conversation.
Yep.
And I didn't know the lady. When you guys got done talking, I go to the lady, stranger, who's the silver guy? And she explained to me about the Micronic Silver, and she had seen you on TV or wherever. And then the girl looked at me, the lady, and she said, did you work at McDonald's? And I was taken aback, and I looked at her. I go, do I know her? And boom, my light bulb went. I go, Margaret? She goes, yeah. The last time I saw her, I was 20 and she was 16. So this very small world moment. And then you gave me your card, and I looked up Micronic Silver and stuff because I'm into natural health products. And I'm like, this is a guy I want to talk to. So that's how we came together. And we already talked about, like, we're going to get to Micronic Silver and all the good stuff, but I want to know a little bit about your beginnings. Take me through your childhood, for starters.
Childhood was an average Midwestern, childhood. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, about 40 miles west.
Which suburbs?
West Chicago, St. Charles, that area there. And, my dad was a contractor. My mom did real estate.
Yeah, it was as a realtor or?
She was just an agent.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so she did that. Parents divorced when I was 15 years old. My dad was an alcoholic, high functioning, never missed a day of work.
My mother too, not so high functioning, but I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I've got to give my dad thanks because I got that work ethic. I became a workaholic instead of an alcoholic. So, high school, I quit high school when I was 16.
Let's we jump too far. So, any siblings in there?
Yeah, I got 4 brothers.
And where are you in the birth order?
I'm the second oldest.
Okay, and then growing up in school, you already jumped to the high school. Were you a good student, an okay student until that point?
I was a terrible student. I have dyslexia and ADHD. So I read upper left to bottom right. So there's words that I don't see when I'm reading, and they appear as a blank in the page. And then my eyes would drop, and I would finish the sentence on the next line. So I never finished a test in high school in my life.
Well, how did you get through grammar school then?
Really just kind of taking hints. In grade school, things are pretty easy, pretty basic. The words are bigger and stuff like that. I don't think it was as big a problem. But I guessed at a lot of things, so I wasn't a good student. And my brother, he was a brilliant student. I mean, straight A's all the way along. I was a CD.
Your older brother?
Yeah, my older brother. I was a CD type of person. My younger brothers, my older brother is 1 year older. My younger brother is 3 years younger. And then the next one after that, I think he was 10 years younger.
So it makes sense that the closeness would be between you and your older brother because then you have a 3-year gap and then a big gap, right?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
That's interesting.
And my older brother was really competitive, I was proud of my older brother, and he didn't like me so much. He didn't, want to take me along, especially being a year apart. I was not as social. He was more social than me. I'd say I'm into sports, but I was into football. I wanted to be a football player my whole life. I raced motorcycles from the time I was younger. And Scott was very good at all sports. And of course, I was better at football than he was, so he didn't play football anymore.
Nice. So your brother, you kind of looked up to him then, yes?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it's and like I said, that rivalry, I mean, that was gone on all through adulthood. No matter what I did, it wasn't, good enough. My brother did better, and and he grew up to have the largest private airline in the United States,
Wow.
65 jets.
Awesome. Are all your brothers still around?
Yeah, my baby brother died in a car accident
Oh, boy.
in 99. I think it was, or no, it wasn't 99. It was 96. Yeah, he died in a car accident. He worked for my company. So
that'd be a torpedo to you, right?
We lost everything, destroyed us.
Wow.
The insurance is only covered so much. By the grace of God, it's interesting because you can be on the top of a mountain and God, well, I can't say God knocks you off, but you get knocked off and God says, now let's see how you do. And it's the faith that carries you through. You can crumble, you can roll over, you can die. I've had that experience my whole life. So even going back to quitting high school and getting a job, I raced motorcycles, loved motorcycles. It was like, okay, if I can't play football, I'm going to be a motocross racer, but wasn't good enough because I don't live in California, or a place where you can ride all year round. And that's my excuse. I just wasn't good enough. And it wasn't what I was meant to do. Football was going to be my key. And then I started playing football when I was 6 years old through the Park District, and I was extremely good. It was fast, strong, tough. I have big bones. I liked hitting people. I liked getting hit, in a competitive fashion. I didn't like to hurt people. And then when I got into high school, I got what was called Seaver's disease, where there's plates on the back of your heel that separate, and they're so painful you can't even touch your heel on the ground. So I had to wear blocks under my shoes all through high school. Couldn't play football anymore.
What are blocks?
They're little wedges that go under the bottom of your shoes to keep your heel off the ground so it doesn't touch the ground. So, walking, I always had to walk funny because I had these like inch pyramids under my shoes that would keep my heel off the ground, but the ball of my foot was always on the ground. Almost comparative like a high heel without your heel touching the ground. So I couldn't really do sports anymore. With that, I tried gymnastics on some things that, parallel bars and pommel horse and things where I didn't really have to make much contact. Wasn't really good at that. And I got into racing, motorcycles because my heels never had to touch the ground unless I crashed, which I did quite a bit. But it's something that I could do that I like to do. But, the football thing was kind of just out. And I wasn't a good student, because of the dyslexia and the reading upper left and bottom right. I didn't finish tests, so I thought, well, there's no sense me going through school because I'm never going to get the grade that would be acceptable. And my freshman year, I was sick. I missed 86 days on freshman year, so I was really sick. And going into my senior year, they called me in the principal's office and they said, we reviewed your freshman year and you don't have enough hours to qualify for those credits, so you're going to have to go another year. Which if they would have told me my freshman year, I could have went to summer school and made it up. But at that point, I was just so out of it with school and just tired of it. I did real good in math. So like calculus and trig, I actually created my own formulas or scales. So, and the teachers always accuse me of cheating. And it's like, well, no, if I have one measurement, everything else is a percentage. You break it down to the lowest common denominator. I could do in 4 steps what you do in 20. And I didn't get that they were looking for, you to know the quotations and formulas. And so I was like, well, this way's easier and faster. So for me, quitting was more a better thing for me mentally because I was just getting further and detached from kids in school. I wasn't antisocial, but my brother was the social butterfly, and my younger brother was very social. So I was in the clique in between. My older brother was a year older. My younger brother was 3 years younger. So when I was a senior, he was a freshman. So he was very social, had tons of friends. So, everybody knew me. I never had problems with people. I just wasn't one that school was very beneficial for me.
Right. So let me pause you on the brothers. Are you still close with your remaining brothers?
No, there's no animosity between us. They're both, even my younger brother got into the aviation business. So my younger one and my older one, they work kind of together, not for the same company, but one of them is FBO operations for a local airport. Excuse me. And the older one, like I said, he's got his businesses that he does, and we just don't have a lot in common. I said, there's no animosity or anything like that. I actually get along better with the nieces and nephews than I do with my brothers, just because there's no common interest.
Hey, everybody, I wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsors. My dear friend Andy Thompson is the owner and operator of Talon Studios. Talon Studios makes custom knives. This is one of the first knives he made it for me. It's extremely sharp. Everything is made by hand, the handles, the grips, everything. They're beautiful, durable knives. We like to say knives for life, whether you're a collector or you want knives for utility and function. He even makes the casings for the knives by hand too. Andy works with his son AJ. They are super fine craftsmen, and every knife they put everything, all their heart and soul into their knives. So that's Talon Studios. I will put a link in the description of each of the podcasts, and you'll see their information at the end. And the reason why I ask you that, I'm an only child, so I pay attention to things that happen around me, especially with humans and families. And that's why I ask you where you're on in the birth order, because that's relevant too. And then all boys. And to me, the strongest bond between people is not, father and child, mother and child. It's brothers. If brothers are actually in alignment, which you guys aren't necessarily in alignment, they're unstoppable. And there's examples of brotherhood where you may not be brothers by blood, but brothers by, trial and whatever. Like, that's why little military units, they're unstoppable, because they have that brotherly bond. And I think that, to me, is the most important. That's the strongest bond between humans with each other. What do you think about that?
Well, especially with males. When you look at growing up, the father-son bond, the male bond, is the one that teaches you how to bond with your siblings or your friends. And that's a very, very strong bond because it's built on respect. Even when you look at biblically, and I know it's going off on a rant a little bit, in the Bible it says, husbands, love your wives, wives, respect your husbands. And there's a big difference, because a man will not tolerate not being respected. A man can deal with not being loved. A woman, on the other hand, needs to be loved. And when you look at raising the children, women love their children. Men do too, but it's showed in a different way. But a woman loving a man does not want to be treated like a child. And when a woman loves something, it's precious, it's honored, that's not a man. A man takes care of those things so she can operate the way that she is. And that's why when I get into conversations about it, I always tell them, well, when you find the right person to be with, God's given you your rib back. You're becoming whole, because that was taken, that's a part of you. Yeah. And like I said, I can get into theology a lot, because a lot of my life is involved in that.
Yeah, we're going to hit that. And you have my personal bullseye, because for me, respect is more important than love. Love is inherited. It can be, right? Your parents love you, you love your parents, whatever. It goes on and on.
It can be an obligation.
But, you could be loved by your parents and not respect them, and vice versa. So to me, respect trumps everything. It's the most important thing, because love can be inherited.
Well, yeah, when somebody respects you, they treat you in a loving nature, and that's the difference. Even when you look at a lot of the depressed areas, you look at a lot of the uneducated ghettos and stuff like that, the guys are always like, you're not going to disrespect me. They have a skewed view of respect, because for them, they think it's owed, not earned, which is a big problem. But,
I agree.
But they'll kill each other over a lack of respect.
Yep.
Where when you look at even Romeo and Juliet and all these romantic fantasies, killing for love, well, men, it's respect.
Yeah.
And men can deal with not being loved. It's fine. You see it in a lot of relationships. Where there's a disconnection there, and you see the guy doing the things that he's always done, little things like scraping the snow off the car, heating it up for her, opening the door for her. But when a woman doesn't respect a man, she doesn't realize those things or honor those things, and that's when relationships start to fall apart. And not that I'm blaming it on women. Men have their own share of things. True. It's the communication that is really hard between men and women, because we have different ways of showing it. It's almost like a Chinese finger pulling thing,
Yeah, and we're going to stay on this side street a little bit longer, then we're going to come back to your path. Men have their own issues, as you said, but I believe feminism, the pendulum has swung too far, and now it becomes that respect component is going away. And that's why I think many men are not, women have this attitude, feminists, a lot of them, not all of them, that I don't need a man. And a man's like, if I have a woman, I want my peace preserved, right? I want my respect. And we're building a chasm between that commonality, the way God meant it to be. And there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of things on the men's side too, but it's kind of heartbreaking to me that we're in this scenario now. Like,
Well, that's the destruction of family in America. Even in the Bible, the word government comes from the Bible. And I hate when people use the separation of church and state against the Bible.
I do too.
Because the word government, God said the man is the head of the family government, that the wife is supposed to bow down to the husband. The husband is the one with the responsibility of, everything in the household. And men have voluntarily given that up. So it's not the woman's fault, but biblically, women are supposed to honor their husbands. And that's why it says respect your husband, respect the decisions he's making. And it's really hard when you get into a divorced family with, children from each side, because then it's like, the mamas want to take care of their kids, and everything except the father, they view as a liability. And I've said this before, I wonder why women will let the husband and father of their children treat them worse than they'll let a stranger. And part of that love of a woman is holding the husband responsible for his actions. And when he has that respect, he will honor that, and he will take a look at that and say, oh my God, you're right, instead of it becoming a big argument or fight.
I agree with you on all of that. That was a good little side street we took. All right, so we're going to come back to you're getting near the end of your high school career, but before you continue that story, I have to ask, because you're a brick shit house, are you doing a lot of weight training through this? I mean, you said you were a big bone, but you're built like a 3 flat. I'm just saying.
Well, when I worked construction, when I graduated high school, I was 140 pounds. So I wasn't a big guy, but I had a big bone structure. I was more of an athletic build, and I love sports. I mean, I lived for them. Other than basketball, couldn't play basketball. I had no interest in playing basketball. And to me, it wasn't physical enough, because I really didn't know how to play it or cared enough to really get into it.
How tall are you?
5'11", or as I like to say, 5'12". 5'11". When I graduated high school, I was 5'10", 140 pounds. Now I'm about 225 pounds. So wow. I've added a whole me to me.
A whole me too, yeah. I'm only 5'9", and I used to tell people, I don't play basketball because I got sick of breaking and jamming my thumbs on the rim. That was just my way to get out of it. So, all right. So we're back in high school now, and you're coming to the end of I'm getting out of here.
Yeah. So when they told me that I'd had to go another year, I'm like, okay, this isn't for me. My stepdad was a truck driver. Their company was looking for somebody to dock semi-trailers.
Let me pause you there. Your mom and dad got divorced when? Like how old were you?
When I was 14, 15.
Okay, so your stepfather at this juncture in your life had been in the picture a few years, right?
About a year and a half.
Okay.
My mom had known him for a while, so it was somebody that we were familiar with. We just didn't know they were dating at that point.
Gotcha.
They got married. I don't know if they got married. I think they got married after I quit high school. So,
and are you still? Is your dad still around?
Yeah, my dad. He's up in Wisconsin.
Do you have a relationship with him?
No.
Okay.
No, he's not a bad guy. It's just, at one point when I lived out actually a couple miles from here. And my dad drove by my house every day, and for 10 years never stopped. And again, I don't harbor any ill feelings. God put it on me not to chase relationships anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's not healthy for you. So if they want to get together, they're here. I'll get together with them. I'll enjoy it. They'll aggravate the crap out of me probably.
And this is just a ball bust, and I haven't known you that long. Jeff Adam is like a lightning bolt. It's hard to get a hold of you anyway. So you're always moving. You know what I mean? So just my observation.
Yeah. I mean, again, a lot of it's, I'm not blameless in anything in my life. I've got my, idiosyncrasies. I find humor in everything. If I look out the street and I see somebody walking the street and do a street sign, I'm busting out laughing. I'm sorry. It's not, I hope they're not hurt. I'll take them to the hospital, but I find it immensely funny.
Yeah, I love it.
And I do try to find humor and everything. I think that's lost in our society right now too.
I agree.
Where people can't laugh at themselves. I laugh at myself all the time. I'm an idiot. I do all kinds of things. One day when I lived out here, I was eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I didn't have a plate. And my partner, she walked by me, and she's like, "What are you doing? And what were you thinking?" And I'm like, "Okay," because I scraped it onto the floor is what I did. I swept the floor like 5 times a day. House cleaning is fine. I like clean, I do dishes and stuff like that. And so I swept it onto the floor, and she's like, "What are you thinking?" I said, "It's very easy. It's bothering me. Now it's not. I'll get a broom and clean it up later," And it was an idiot thing to do, but I'm pretty much organic with myself. I understand it. So I don't get offended when people point out my idiosyncrasies or my deficiencies. I'm like, okay, that gives me something to work on.
So then you definitely have to be a professional ball buster. You got to be good at it and great at taking it, right?
Yeah, probably to a detriment. I mean, as a competitive guy, I probably take it too far. And, it's in a professional setting, I really got to remind myself that not everything's a joke.
Yeah, I just read an article that talked about ball busting, and they didn't call it ball busting, they called it whatever. And they said when you have relationships where it's a two-way ball busters, those are really like kindred spirits. Those are friendships that are long lasting, that you could do that, because you don't have to be measured in your communications, right? So
no, that's actually a sign of respect in the male culture, and people don't view it that way. As men, we're competitive. Remember, we were the hunters. We were the ones that would do the dangerous things, and even by design. So women work in the macro, men's work in the micro. Women are school teachers, they're nurses, they thrive, and I'm not cutting them down, they thrive in that. Men build buildings and bridges and the huge things. So it's a very competitive nature with men. And it's not a bad thing. It's actually what is really good for the development and the confidence of men. And that's why having a father is really important in a marriage for the daughters, because they get their confidence from their dad. They get the compassion from the mom. And so when you don't have that, you see a lot of dysphoria and dysfunction. And that's where I think a lot of the problems that we have in our society are from not having that male influence, or daddy issues, as they call it. And of course, a lot of men being really aggressive and competitors, a lot of men look for that so they can exploit it. And that's why we're seeing so much damage in our culture. And again, I know I'm going on another tributary.
Yeah, but we're going to do that a lot. I call them side streets. So yeah.
Yeah. So when men joke around back and forth, you're actually looking for somebody that you can encompass in your life that isn't going to put you under a microscope. And that's what a lot of women do with their men or husbands, is they're under a microscope. Women remember everything. I mean, gosh, I don't know how many relationships I've had where somebody's brought up something 10 years ago and said, yeah, well, you did this. I'm like, when did I do this? I don't even remember. So men look for people in their life that they can have these friendly competitions with, that you can go back and forth and not worry about that man getting all ticked off and walking away and say, we're not friends anymore.
I follow Jordan Peterson a lot. So Jordan Peterson's real smart. And he has these debates with feminists often. And, he's coming from like a neuroscience approach. And he's like, look, we're not the same, because women are more interested in people and we're more interested in stuff, which you just said. That's why women gravitate toward teaching and, nursing and doctoring and all that stuff. And men are building things. And just the way we're wired, it's the way God meant it to be. It's no dig against each other. And that's why the union of both is awesome, right?
Yeah.
And they've also done studies, and, a lot of women are going to get mad at me for saying this. I was raised by a single mom, but I had a whole support structure behind me of men. Children raised by single fathers, whether it be sons or daughters, they turn out a lot better than children raised by single mothers. And I think that's because the man is wired toward survivability. I'm going to teach you how to survive in this world. And they're okay with the children taking risks. Go, fall down, get scraped up, whatever. Where the mothers are very protective and nurturing, and that's the way they're supposed to be, right? So,
yeah. Well, it's the male eagle that pushes the little birds out of the nest. That's what guys do. You can't expand yourself if you don't test boundaries. And look at little boys. I mean, they're curious by nature. I mean, a little girl will sit down and play with a doll. She'll organize things. Women are great at organization. Women are great at structure. Guys are great at distractions. I function much better with distraction. If I have a million things going on around me, I'm constantly, catching things. I have a really wide peripheral vision, and I actually focus on other conversations more than the one I'm at. It seems like I hear other things, and I'm always distracted. And I tell people, please don't take offense to it. It's just that's the way I'm wired. But women are more focused. You look at offices, and if you have an office of just men, and a woman walks in, every single guy will stop and look. And sometimes, stare, sometimes oogle. I mean, that's how we're wired. You have an office full of women and a guy walks in, they don't even notice him.
I'm stealing that from you.
And I used to joke around and say, you know what? Women can outperform men in businesses. And the greatest thing is you don't have to pay them as much. And it was kind of a joke to take the light of it, but it's very true. Women are more focused on, a lot of your high level scientists, the researchers are women because they are so detail oriented. A man doesn't worry about the small things. And it's just like, in a sports team, you don't worry about the little guy sticking out his arm to try to tackle you. It's a 275-pound linebacker that you don't want to get his hand on you. And I think men just don't worry about detail as much because it's not as important. The bigger picture, the macro is more important than the micro.
And I can attest to what you just said because I was in an environment, the bulk of my career was on the trading floor. So you want to talk about a male-dominated business. In the pits themselves, it was maybe a 50-to-1 ratio, men to women. And, you're exactly right. Because we'd have, female trade checkers and a lot of these young ladies were knockouts. And you want to see like 100 guys in a trading pit all like stop whatever they're thinking about when a pretty girl walks in the center of the pit, and you'll look at the other side of the pit and we're all hyper focused on that young lady. So that's proof right there.
Yeah. And again, it's not there. See, a feminist would take slight to what we're saying. And they'd be like, oh, well, you're cutting us down. You're saying we can't be this. We can't. No, I'm not. We're not saying that at all. We're saying this is man's deficiency we're talking about, that a man will take a break from whatever he's doing to notice what's around him. And this is one of the reasons, too, I believe, why there's when you look at a lot of these women that are raped or attacked, it's because they are unaware of the things around them, because they are so detail-oriented what's going on in their brain, where a man does notice everything around him. That guy standing over there, that's leaning against a wall looks like he's up to something. Right. Where a lot of women don't really notice that stuff.
Yeah, I call that situational awareness. And when you grow up in the city versus the suburbs, you just inherently have more situational awareness because there's more threats around you,
Yeah, it's more dangerous. There's more people there.
Yeah, my wife grew up in the suburbs, and I remember we took our honeymoon into Hawaii, and we were walking through an outdoor mall at night, and there were, tons of people, but there was a group of teenagers, and they were all like sitting, and there was maybe 10 of them. And, so I saw them, and they were looking right at me, and then we walked past them, and they all got up, and I could see, in my rear view mirror. So I literally pushed Dorothy into a store. She goes, what are you doing? I go, you didn't see those guys? Now, I don't know if they were up to mischief or not. It didn't matter, but it's to pick up on that, right? It's a male thing, and you're hyper focused when you come from the city.
Yeah, and I think growing up too, little girls, they're, oh, I love your hair. Your hair's pretty. They're this and that. They're not worried about it. Where, I remember as a young boy, I always, if I didn't know the situation around me, I always thought somebody wanted to beat me up. So I was really aware of certain things. But again, growing up in the suburbs, I was naive. So when I was in my probably about 18 years old, I took a job selling stuff. It was colognes or no, it was home improvements. And I went into an area. Now I'm from the suburbs. I had to go out to Robbins.
Oh boy!
And I'm just driving there. I'm like, I got my brand new Cutlass Supreme. I drive there, and I get out, and I'm walking down the street, and suddenly I'm walking by. It's actually a gun shop, and this hand reaches out and grabs me and pulls me into the gun shop, and he shows me his badge. He's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, the company sent me out here for home improvements to sell this and that. He goes, you don't belong here. I'm like, what do you mean? And he walks me outside. He goes, you see those 5 guys right there that have been following you for a block and a half? You see those 3 guys over there?
Holy crap.
He said, they were going to steal everything you have, take your keys, steal your car. He goes, you don't belong here because you're a white man, a white young man in a black man's neighborhood. And he says, when I made a black man, I said, these are guys that are tough. He says, you can think you're as bad as you are. I'm like, I don't think anything. I didn't know. He's like, I'm going to walk you back to your car. He says, get in your car. He said, don't ever come back here.
Wow.
And so a lot of it is situational awareness.
And that's a long time ago too.
Wow. Gosh, yeah, I was 19. So that was almost a little over 40 years ago.
Wow. All right. So you're kind of like, so you decided to stop high school. Did you get right into this sales job? Was that your first thing? What did you do after you, first of all, what did your parents think when you're like, I'm not going to finish high school?
My dad didn't have an opinion of it whatsoever. He was a carpenter, a millwright.
When you say dad, you mean your stepdad? Or
my real dad.
Okay.
And my stepdad was a truck driver, so he had a job, and he's like, hey, we're looking for somebody to do this. So I did 16, going on 17 years old, I was making almost $400 a week. This is back in 1982, 83.
Which would explain New Cutlass Supreme in that story, right? I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. Well, at that point, I had bought a Camaro. a couple-year-old Camaro.
What year was that? What year Camaro?
That was an 83 Camaro.
Did it have, was it an SS with the cowl induction?
No.
I had that.
No, actually, no, it wasn't, which was surprising because even when I was in high school at 14, I started working. So my friend's dad was a contractor. My whole family was contractors. So I'd build houses in the summertime and then after work, and I'd go and work. So at 14 years old, my first car was a 1966 Chevy Impala Super Sport SS with a 396
Sweet.
rock crusher, 4-speed.
Oh, man.
And I got my license and blew up the motor the first week.
That's so funny.
Like I said, I'm an idiot.
All right, so I had all fast cars, when I was a young man too, and I drove like an asshole. It's a miracle I'm alive, right? And then I'll see young kids doing that, and I'll cuss, and I'll go, nope, you were that kid at one time, right? So,
yeah, you're fearless. I mean, it's until your I guess your thought process, you don't recognize dangers until they actually happen. And of course, if you have a wreck or an accident, it's really ingrained into you. But when you have that close one where, I didn't correct this and I didn't crash or whatever, and you go, oh my God, I'm never doing that again because it scared me enough.
All right. So what were you doing when you're making $400 a week? And let's go through.
Well, again, that was at 14 years old. So that at a point, my parents were separated. So I was buying my own school lunches, stuff like that. I bought my own school clothes. I guess I was always grounded. I've never in my life smoked, done drugs, drunk alcohol. I mean, a contractor for 40 years and never had a touch of alcohol. And I think a lot of that was because I had a lot of alcoholics in the family. I had 9 uncles that were alcoholics. I have 63 cousins, and I think 3/4 of them are alcoholics now. Wow. And so, and my best friend didn't drink. So that helped. He got me into racing motorcycles and that stuff. And, he had a Cutlass Supreme. I had a Cutlass Supreme. I mean, we always had what each other had.
And your best friend is who?
My friend Steve.
Nice.
He's a contractor, so I worked for his dad. We're still friends to this day.
It's no accident, and you know this because we're like-minded, that you come together with someone like doesn't drink and all that stuff. That's a divine thing. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah. Well, and my brother's a year older, so he's a partier. I'm younger than him, and my mom made me responsible for him. So if he got drunk, I got in trouble. And he was drunk all the time. I mean, he was drinking every chance he had. Yeah, so it was just like, okay. And part of it, I think, was I wanted my own personality, and he's the partier, the drunk person. My friend Steve and I, we would go ride our dirt bikes every day after school. We go roller skating. We were always together and stuff. And I kind of just didn't spend money on stupid things. The money that I saved on alcohol and cigarettes is probably the biggest thing. When I looked at all my friends that were broke, and they were always drinking and they were always smoking. And I'm like, no, I want to buy parts for my motorcycle. Or I wanted to buy a car. I was really into cars, so I've had a lot of cars, and was also just more responsible, I think, than the average kid at that time, my age. I wasn't in trouble with the police. I really didn't push limits for anything. Sports, obviously you push your limit on sports because you want to be the best you can be, or racing motorcycles, and like the motorcycles, if I did something stupid, I hurt myself. So I was always conscious of not hurting anybody else and didn't want anybody else to dislike me.
How old are you?
I'm 60 years old.
Okay. So we're right there. I'm 61. I'm a car guy as well. And I've been a worker bee my whole life like you. And tell me if this applied to you. I liked having my stuff, right? So you like your car, you want to have a nice car, you go to work and you like to work and you make your money and you buy your nice car. Like one thing fueled the other, right? Like I'm already a worker bee, but I like my stuff, and that was motivating, right? And
oh yeah. Oh, my Cutlass, I wanted it painted, and so I had that, and then I bought, being construction, I was like, okay, at that point I had my Cutlass and my Camaro, and I was working construction, so I had a truck, and the guy that I was working for, it was a 4x4, 1979 Ford F-250. And he's like, you ever think about plowing with that thing? I'm like, no. He goes, do you want to? I was like, I don't have a plow. He goes, well, he says, because I'd done some jobs for him, so he knew me and I knew his nephew. And he's like, well, if you want, he says, I'll put a plow on it. And I was like, really? I said, how much that cost? It's about $2,500. I'm like, oh, I don't have the money for that. He goes, listen, anytime you've worked for me, you've shown up. You've always answered, the calls. And this time this time when nobody had cell phones. And he's like, so you seem responsible and stuff. He says, so if I can count on you to be there, he said, we'll take it off your snow plowing. And he said, so he put a plow in my truck for me. And
so you worked it off.
Yeah. Yeah. And in construction, winters are slow. So this is perfect. This is great for me. And the first 2 snowfalls, he's like, well, how much do you want to take? I'm like, take it all. I don't want to owe you money.
Oh yeah. So everything you earned, put it toward the plow. Right?
Yeah. Oh, I hated owing people money. So like the cars I bought, I usually bought cash. would save my money and buy, a house I bought here. We paid for cash, so it was, no, I'm paying cash for everything. I don't like owing people money. And like, I didn't have credit cards for a long time. When I was younger, I had them, gave my mom credit cards. She maxed them all out, didn't tell me, and my credit was trashed. And so I got rid of credit cards and was always against them. But being in business, you have to have credit cards, so with the construction company, I didn't have any. So I would, if I wanted something, I would save my money. I would buy it. And then a friend of mine said, well, you got to start, getting some credit or something. So then my Camaro I bought on payments, my Cutlass I bought on payments, and it was just always a month ahead of time because I was so afraid that I wouldn't, with construction, it was unstable. And it would actually was one of the most stable things I had in my life was construction, to be honest with you. But I always worked. I always found work. I always did side jobs, finish basements, build decks, even when I was working for other companies. So I'd end up I worked 110 hours a week for 40 years.
Holy crap. And I want to pause you on and we'll get into this again because we're like-minded and we're the same age. When you're a young man and you're working and you got a kick-ass car and you're driving that car around, like there's almost nothing higher euphorically than that in your whole life. Like you were on top of the freaking world.
Oh, and then I had motorcycles.
No, about that.
So I had my dirt bike. I had my my Honda XL 600. So I could put my helmet on and go riding on the streets, and I always had $300 or $400 in my pocket.
So you got all this stuff going on. The young ladies you had to be getting their attention, no?
Again, this is me being an idiot. A girl or a woman talking to me was just somebody being nice to me. I'd never looked at it as like, okay, they wanted to go out. I mean, a woman could be hitting on me and I didn't know it. I was so oblivious. And in high school, I had girls come up to me and, they'd talk to me and they'd be like, so is your brother dating anybody? So I didn't have the self-esteem or the self-confidence at that point. I didn't date till I was out of high school. I mean, so, we'd go to clubs and go dancing. I did that, several nights a week. I had friends. I had a lot of friends that were girls and we had such a good time. It was never really, I was never into the sexual relationships or, I'm going to go out and get a piece or any of that kind of stuff. And I seen my friends were that way. A lot of them were getting their hearts broken. A lot of times they had drama everywhere they went. And I'm like, I don't want any of this. So I just wanted to have a girlfriend, it just never really clicked with me at that point. I dated some girls. I had some girlfriends, but I wasn't one that ran around looking to hook up with anybody. And I wanted to ride my motorcycle. I mean, really, I wanted to work on my car. I wanted to do stuff like that. And I had friends that did the same thing. So my guy relationships were really good and healthy. And I thought the relationships I had with women were actually healthy.
This ties into what we talked about before. It's quite possible that your level of achievement was better than it would have been if you had the distraction of a girlfriend or you were into dating girls and going to bed with girls and stuff. Because there's a whole school of thought about like when a man devotes himself to celibacy, he can achieve the highest highs because he doesn't have this distraction. Do you agree with that or no?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's your focus. When quote, you're focused on getting laid, you're not focusing on other things in your life. And I had so many guys that I knew that was their main focus. Even when they were in relationships, they would cheat on their girlfriends. And I had some of them that like, well, if Lisa calls, can you tell her this? I'm like, no, I'm not lying for you. I'm not doing this. I really found God's been in my life my whole life. But when I was 14 years old, there was Salt Life. They would come in and they were groups that would get kids together and you go do trips and stuff like that. And at like 14 years old, I gave my life to Jesus Christ. And I didn't really understand the meaning of that, but I think internally it held me to a higher accountability and to try to lead a better life. And I think I didn't get into a lot of the things. And when you're that age, I mean, drinking has a lot to do with the stupid choices that I think young adults make. So, and because I was always responsible and I never wanted to be out of control, because I was a control freak. I mean, 100%.
I'm 100% with you.
And I never wanted to have that excuse was, well, I was drunk, so I was out of control. And I seen the decision my brother made. He wrecked a couple cars, just stupid, cheating on girlfriends and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't want any of that.
So let me ask you, did you have any influencers to your faith or did it come to you? Like how it's so early? I mean, did you grow up in a faithful family? What influenced you to give your life to Christ at 14?
I really don't know. I mean, it was, I think, there was a couple of leaders, and I couldn't tell you their name right now, that they seem to be very just genuine people. They seem to like people. People like them. They, I think that was like, wow, this is like a really good guy. I remember when I was probably 12 or 14 years old, it was at Little League football, and they were having a get together afterwards. And I remember the one kid's father didn't drink alcohol, so he'd have Cokes and something. And I'd mention, well, why doesn't your dad drink beer? He said, oh, my dad doesn't drink. And my first thought was, what kind of man is he? And that really stuck with me for a long time, and then I got up to saying, wow, all my dad does is have alcohol. Well, what kind of man is he?
Right.
So it really changed with perspective with age. And I just think it was something that God put in me.
That's interesting. So we'll get back to the control thing. I'm an only child and I grew up fatherless. Thank God my mom had a huge family, 7 uncles and a sister. I mean, I grew up like a prince, even though my mother was an alcoholic, and then later she died of a drug overdose. In that time frame when I was a little boy, she would leave me alone. Like, she was supposed to come home at a certain time, 5 or 6 o'clock. She was a gifted hairstylist. And then inevitably 2 or 3 times a week, I'd get a call from her. She'd be at the bar, starting to get tipsy. I'll be home in an hour. I'm coming home. Then another call, then another call. Now it's 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I'm scared to death. And I'm calling one of my uncles or my Aunt Rose, and someone's coming to rescue me. So in those scenarios, as a little boy, I became a survivor. And when you're a survivor, you have to like supercharge your situational awareness. So I would be like hiding steak knives around the house, thinking about entry points if somebody was trying to break in and how am I going to defend myself. And that's where I got the control thing. It's like, I never want to be out of control because I'm doing drugs or drinking and getting drunk, because if I have to be the best version of myself, I'm not going to be. I'm decreasing my ability to survive, right? And that's what motivated me to always be in control of myself.
No, being that way, now were you always looking, like analyzing things for signals? So because your mom would tell you stuff and it wouldn't come true, or so that trust issue would be there. So at that point, whenever somebody told you something, didn't you kind of sit there and analyze it and go, is this BS or is this really going to happen?
That is a really great question. So I had 2 opposing forces. I had my mother, who was, I would just say nicely, hung me out to dry. And my mother loved me. I knew it. That's one thing that kept me engaged. But I had all these other people. I had 7 uncles and my Aunt Rose, who's still alive, and she's my angel on earth. So I had all of these other signals where people who were telling me this is the way it is, and that was the way it is. So I didn't become overly distrusting of people because my mother was BSing me, because I had all these other people who were actually, their words were their bonds, and they, So
the good influences counterbalance the bad influences in your life.
My mother was an individual, but now I look at individuals and I'll always have that back program of my mom, like, are they bullshitting or not? But I don't get consumed with it. I'm still good-hearted, and I give people the benefit of the doubt more times than not. And sometimes, this is what I say, sometimes the losers and takers get the best of us movers and shakers, but it's okay because we live a better life. So good-hearted people, if you're overly accepting of people and not overly discerning about are they genuine or not, and you let them in without too much calculation and you get a chunk of your ass taken out, it's okay. That's the price we pay as being good-hearted people.
Yeah, I always say if somebody rips me off, they must need it more than I do.
Yeah, that's a really good frame out. But before we continue on your story, I was just thinking about when I met you, and we just had maybe a couple, 3 sentences of dialogue, and you came off to me as like, I read you as a very strong person emotionally, very secure in yourself. And when you are like that, that strength projects out. And I felt it. I'm like, I just said, this guy's somebody, I can just feel it, what you said, how you said it, how you walked. And I have the same thing. And a lot of times when you're interacting with people, that intrudes into their space. Like if they're insecure or whatever, like you could be a hard pill to swallow, correct?
Probably. I really had a hard time with self-promotion. So being that in what I do for a living now, when we were walking, I think I told you, Judy Mikovits is one of my, our partners, channel partners, distribution partners. And did I tell you I could introduce you to her? I didn't remember if I told you that or not.
You did.
Yeah.
You told me that. Yeah.
I look at what God's giving me, and I realize that I can come across that way. So I'm a little more aware of how I interact with people. And I'm not one of those people come up and go, well, I know this person, or I do this and I do that, and I can do this for you and do that for you. So I try to get to know the person on an actual personal level. And, I've had some people that have taken advantage. I've had some people that have really disappointed me. But when you have your faith in God, it's like it's very easy to say, you know what, I'm going to bless them. You can love people from afar. And I think this is what a lot of Christians lose. When they say, you got to forgive people, you got to do this and that. Yeah, you got to forgive them, but you don't have to interact with them. You don't have to have anything to do with them anymore. Mm-hmm. You can love them from afar and pray for them. And that's what God calls us to do. Jesus didn't call for us to save anybody. He called us to love everybody unconditionally. He does the saving. All we have to do is just pray for them.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, loving unconditionally doesn't mean I got to hang out with you, right? If somebody really hurts you and you give them the grace that Jesus would want you to give them, it doesn't mean you got to hang out with them.
Well, yeah, and that's where the loving people unconditionally and being saved unconditionally. I've heard so many preachers say it and then go, but if you act this way, well, then that's not unconditional, is it? It's conditional. Right. That means that you can earn it by doing good things. And that means there was no reason for Christ to die on the cross. Because if we could earn our way to it, if we could act a certain way and get it, it is grace without faith holds no merit. It's the faith that activates the grace that was freely given to us. So when God said, put his son to die for us, all he asks is that we accept him into our heart and we believe in him. He doesn't call for us to do a whole bunch of things. And when I hear these pastors go, oh, you have to violently go after Christ. No, it's right there. You just have to reach out. Every time Christ did a miracle, all he required was an action for somebody to show that they had faith in it.
Do you think that we have so many Christian faiths and now, we'll have preachers talking about kind of the acceptance of abortion and all this stuff. Is this Satan at work?
Yeah.
Satan's infiltrating the church, right?
Yeah, well, this was so prevalent during the pandemic. So God is the great healer. All churches teach it. But they're shutting down for COVID because that doesn't apply. And then after the restrictions were removed, now, God's a great healer again. Well, no, God doesn't change. His word doesn't change. Some pope or some cardinal or some pastor saying it's different. God's word is absolutely solvent. There's nothing that changes in it. What it is it's Satan corrupting God's word. When he can get us to doubt God's word or to not accept it or think that there's something more to it, that's how he tricked Eve into taking a bite of the apple.
Right.
It's all deceit. And as I told you earlier, the line in the Bible where it says the faith of a mustard seed is also the doubt of a mustard seed. And Satan knows the Bible better than any of us do. And he can manipulate and try to do it. And when they were, again, as we talked earlier, when they were building the Tower of Babel, they were succeeding. And what happened? God confused the language. And when he confused the language, it crumbled. Now, we've seen the same thing during the pandemic. They were using the lessons of Babel against us. They were changing the language. mRNA, which is messenger ribonucleic acid, they changed to modified ribonucleic acid. They changed the terms of everything. And they said, they're lying. They're this. No, they're confusing the language. And when they confuse the language and we're not speaking on one accord, they can accomplish great evil deeds. When you look at the ghettos, they're always talking condemnation. They're talking about people holding them down and the man doing this, and they're calling their kids names, bastards, or, this damn kid did this or that. They're speaking condemnation over their areas, and that's why they're in that situation. If they spoke praises over their people, like in the Jewish religion, in the Hebrew, there's no word for condemnation for their children. They only speak blessings of them. And so you wonder why they're so prosperous?
That's interesting. And I want to just do one little backpedal here, because you said, unconditional love. Back to the feminist thing, it seems to me that in the modern Western culture that we live in, that love from women to men is purely conditional. We have to be the add value to them. He's got to make money. He's got to take care of me. He's got to do this. And as soon as some of those moving parts start to waver, then the love also wavers. That's just my opinion.
Well, listen to a lot of the feminists that are out there, and they're talking about high value. I want a man who makes this. I want a man who does this. I want a man who does this. What do you have to offer?
Right.
You think a man wants to put up with that? You're not going to honor your man. You're going to tell him what he's going to buy you or what he's going to do for you. Someone once told me that a good husband will sacrifice his happiness for his wife's. A good wife will sacrifice her husband's happiness for her own.
I believe that.
And we see a lot of that in our society because anytime you devalue anybody, there's a price for it. And when you see with the feminism, they don't praise motherhood. Like, oh, I should have a high paying job. I should have this and I should have that. The typical roles that God laid out for us is the man was the provider, the women had the children and took care of them, the man was the protector. That there was roles, and with this transgender stuff and all this stuff they're putting out there, they confuse those roles and they say, okay, well, you don't need a man. Yeah, of course you don't. A man doesn't need a woman either. But I'll tell you what, if there's a war going on, do you want women fighting a war or do you want a man fighting a war? Just from a physical aspect. You're carrying that gun, you're carrying that rucksack, you're carrying 400 pounds of ammunition. You got to march through, a mile and a half of marsh and field to then go into hand-to-hand combat. You can be the strongest woman in the world. I'm sorry, but you're not in a position to do that.
I just want to share a quick side story with you on that particular subject. I'm going to have a lady on here who is a Marine. She was in combat. She got injured, and we were just talking, and I just flatly said to her, "Do you think women should be in the military?" Without hesitation, she said no. She said, I saw two of my dear friends, male and female. They were in a firefight, and that male reacted purely to protect the female, and they both died. He did the wrong thing on the battlefield because it's in our instinct to protect women. And this is a Marine telling me, I don't think women should be in the military, like in a combat role.
No, and other militaries count on that. They understand that, and they will go after the women. They will seize the women. They will rape the women. They will do this stuff all to break the moral of the men that you didn't protect them. And that's really it's not any kind of condemnation on women. Women are amazing. Men can't give birth, even if the Democrats tell you they can.
Right?
They can't give birth. They can do amazing things. Their body was designed to do amazing things. Men's bodies were also designed to do amazing things. I had a friend of mine who was a professional tennis coach, and he was taught some of the top tennis players in the world that were women. And he said, and I think it was in early 2000, they did an experiment. So they took 13-year-old boys and had them play tennis against the top women tennis players in the world. Those women won about 80% of the tennis matches. They took 14-year-old boys and did that same thing. The professional tennis players didn't win one. And these are against high school kids, just getting into high school. That's the big difference. Mm-hmm. A woman's going to have an 80-mile-an-hour serve. A man's going to have a 120-mile-an-hour serve. Now, you can have the best eyes in the world, but if your reactions aren't quick enough to send that back, and again, then when it's sent back, it's accelerated. There's a bunch of differences between men and women that were meant for the survival of the species. And when you start dismantling those roles, well, our birth rate's down.
Well, one of the Williams sisters, which one was the better tennis? Serena Williams. She was on a talk show. I think it was Conan. And he asked her, whoever the talk show host, how would you do against the top male player? I think it was Andy Roddick. I don't remember. She goes, he beat me in straight games, and they'd probably be really fast games. Like it'd take him maybe 10 minutes. And it pissed everybody off. She was just being honest. This is to your point, right?
And she's one of the exceptions. I mean, you look at their builds. You look at they were the best at what they did. Those would be the exceptions, and that exception is saying there's no comparison. Even like Danica Patrick with racing cars, she was very, very good. She didn't have the muscle strength and the stamina. The men's bodies are built different. The endurance is different. A man's heart is bigger. A man's lungs are bigger. We can move more oxygen. Those things all come into play when you're talking about physical activities. This is why, in an academic level, a woman's 100% on par with a man, and I think usually better at those things than men because their processing is different. When it comes to physicality, a man is going to outdo a woman every single time, and it doesn't mean there's not exceptions that could probably do it, but they will only be able to function to the average level of a male. Where when you have the men that are the top in that, there's going to be no comparison whatsoever.
I agree. And Jordan Peterson, back to him, when arguing with the feminists, they will say, physically, we're not that far apart. He goes, take the strongest female, and then there's going to be crossover. She's going to be superior physically to some men, but at the extremities, the strongest female against the strongest man, there's no comparison, none.
No.
So
no, even if you do the strongest to the weakest, there may be, like you said, there may be some that can beat it. If you take an expert in something and then put a novice or a beginner that hasn't trained, that hasn't done the stuff to do it. When you take somebody that's had the equal training of it, even if they're not a professional, but have had the physicality, knows how to do the things, the female will not. Maybe they'll win 1 or 2 matches or something like that, or they'll have some success, but they will not. They wouldn't never be considered a pro at that if they had to compete against them.
Agreed. And we'll probably get a few twisted looks on this podcast, but we're just speaking our truths.
Well, we're speaking the truth, and that's a big difference because you actually heard the other side go, well, this is my truth. This is my truth. My truth is I want to live in a big white house and drive a helicopter to work. That's my truth. That doesn't make it reality. So we've taken dysfunction, and this is part of the natural health too. When you're not naturally healthy physically, your mental goes. And this is how they got the dysphoria going, because when you're not feeling good for a long time and you have some sicko in your ear telling you, oh, it's okay, even though you have a penis, you're a female. And they tell this stuff. Now, because your physical is so bad, your mental is looking for relief. Now you're being told something that's going to stimulate the receptors in your brain, and the dopamine's going to go, oh, I feel better now. And that's how, when they started passing laws that you can't tell kids that heterosexual is natural, and you have to tell them that homosexuality is, and it's okay. We've taken these dysfunctions and said it's okay when it's not. It's not by nature. It's not by anything else. It's by a certain group of people lobbying a certain amount of government reps to say, well, now you have to do this. And that's the way you desensitize people to things. That's how you change laws. That's how socialism gets in. That's how they got Bible God out of schools, is by desensitizing people to it. So not enough people showed up to vote for the other thing because they go, oh, it will never pass. Is because we didn't stand on our laurels and we didn't fight against it.
Agreed wholeheartedly. I do a lot of posting about freedom. I do a lot of posting about challenging people to challenge themselves, right? And this is all part of the PSYOP, is kind of sanitizing brains to the point where we forget history, right? So you said pandemic. Well, they come out with a shot. They call it a vaccine within months. No, I think the fastest a vaccine ever made it into production is 4 years of research. And I think that one failed. So they tell you, we have a vaccine, take one shot, and you're good. You won't get COVID and you won't transmit COVID. And then a few months goes by and they tell you, you may need another shot. Now, right there, whatever your opinion is, did you forget that they told you, like, you will only need one shot? But then when they present, you might need another shot, they'll go, oh, well, this, that. They make all up these excuses. And then the next one and the next one. And you systematically forget everything they told you before. You know, they have mind control over you.
Well, they changed the language. They use different terms. You know, they convinced you that the term that they use now was different than the term they used. They changed the term of a virus.
And vaccine.
Yeah. And they've also, they take things out like immunization. If you have immunization, building the immune system, which God put in you everything you need to defeat anything that man has ever created. And you take that out and you say, well, now we're going to rely on a vaccination. You know, it used to take an average of 17 years to bring a vaccine product to market. And by the way, the companies that are making these, big pharma, these are the fertilizer companies. These are the toxic companies, the ones that make paints and perfumes, that are coming out with these remedies to the things that they actually put into us that caused a problem. So this is the arsonist calling the fire department and getting the medal for putting out the fire.
Yeah, it's a perfect business plan to make money. That's all it is, and control us. So we're very like-minded. And we'll get back to some of this stuff. So
I'd love to see this like on a spider chart, because there's all these different roads I go down, and it's my ADD. My brain just goes.
No, that's fine.
directions.
And I call them side streets, and I like to do that. And then, you know, my job is to bring us back to where we are in the timeline. So you're working, you're making money, you got cars. When does things start to change a little bit? Like when do you meet somebody and get married, or what major events or evolutions happen now to where we are in the story?
Well, I mean, there's a big jump there, because all I did was work, you know, and then I met a woman, and she was going through a divorce. She had kids, and
what age about were you?
No, that was 32 years ago. So 30.
So he's going to be right around
28.
Late 20s, yeah.
You know, we ended up moving in together and helping raise her kids, and became partners in business, and that's kind of where the big change was. And it was nice because, at that 28-year-old age, Christmas is another day. You don't have kids in your life. Her daughter was 4 when I met her. Her oldest son was 12. And, we just had a normal relationship at that point with the company, and had the highs and lows that come with construction. Feast or famine is 100% real. And then in 2000, and this is going, from 90s to the 2000s, it was just a normal household with teenage kids. And then in 2007, when the market crashed, we didn't sell a project for 3 years. I had crews running. I had, people that, okay, we're going to lay these people off. We had projects going that people couldn't pay us. The financial institutions crashed. It was like, okay, now what do we do? And I had met a gentleman who was a nuclear biochemical engineer. He's one of 8 in the world. At least that's what he told me. He had over 180 patents on medical products. And I took a job installing the 4G wireless in Chicago, and had to go up to top buildings and that kind of stuff. And this man was in the penthouse. And he was brilliant. He was like 80 years old. And he'd have his laptop open, and he would be doing like 40 different windows doing calculation. He probably forgot more than I'll ever know in my life.
Another shout out to one of our sponsors, Nevis Nutrition, which is a vitamin and supplement shop in Lamont. Owner Joe Bosco, dear friend of mine. Joe is super knowledgeable in nutrition, extremely knowledgeable in fitness. All the top athletes, weightlifters, bodybuilders, they go over there. He's really instrumental in help coaching our young athletes too. He's located in Lamont. I'll put the address in the description as well. Do you want to say his name?
No.
Okay.
No, because he didn't get along with his family, and
no problem.
He introduced me to Silver when I was up there doing some work on a project. It was a month-long project, and it was a Friday, and I'd gotten pneumonia, and my lungs were bothering me. And I told him, I said, I can't. I would stay about an hour a day and talk to him and learn from him. And because being in the suburbs, I lived right out here in Lamont. It was about, an hour drive during rush hour to get home. So if I left at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, I got home at the same time. So it was just really interesting and seemed to know a lot about a lot of things. And I finally said, I can't talk to you today. I said, I got pneumonia. I got to get to the hospital and get some treatments. And he's like, well, and he had a whiny little voice. He's like, how do you know it's pneumonia? And I said, well, I said, I've had it before. I'm an asthmatic. It's always both lungs. So, and he pulled out a little bottle of clear liquid and said, well, take this and your lungs won't hurt you in the morning. And that's when the contractor and me came out. So I argued with him for about 20 minutes. He actually grabbed the bottle out of my hand. He said, fine, go to the doctors, be like everybody else. Let them kill you. The world's better off without you.
Wow.
And he walked away. He was cantankerous.
This would be 2007-ish?
2007, 2008.
So just that, what he just said there, that's way ahead of the times, right?
Oh, yeah. About an hour later, he comes back to me and he says, do you know how people die from pneumonia? And I'm like, no, how do people die from it? I said, you know what? I said, yeah, it affects the lungs, right? And he said, that's not what I asked. Do you know why people die from pneumonia? And I'm thinking Bernie Mac was one of my favorite comedians. A guy's got all the money, fame, fortune, and this man dies from pneumonia. And I'm like, well, no, I guess I don't, but I guess you're going to tell me. And he said, yeah, there's 7 medicines that work on pneumonia, and 4 of them are different compilations of the same medicine, like erythromycin, amoxicillin, penicillin. He goes, and they're ineffective within 7 years of each other. So by the 3rd time, it's critical, and by the 4th time, it becomes terminal. And he walked away. And now, being a contractor, I'm good at math. 4th time in 6 years getting pneumonia. So I went up to him and I said, you know what? Okay, I'll take it. I'm not wasting it on you. You said, you're just so smart. You know everything. And I said, well, no. I said, you said, what you said scared me. He goes, yeah, I'm not wasting it on you. And I said, well, go get a spoon. Get a spoon. I'll take it right here in front of you. And this is actually the question that made, what he'd asked me that made him go get it. He goes, you're not going to ask what it tastes like. I said, I don't care what it tastes like. I know it's going to be 6 weeks of prednisone and Z-Paks just to feel better, and then months to get my wind back. I said, because I've had it before. And so he got a spoon. I took it, and he told me how to take it at home. And that was on a Friday. When I woke up Saturday morning, I had no pain in my lungs whatsoever.
Wow.
And then by that Monday, when I went back there, I was like, I felt better than I'd felt in a long time. And I was like, okay, what is this stuff? He goes, well, a smart person would have probably asked me that before they took it. And I'm like, okay, so you proved I'm not as smart as I think I am. And he said, well, it's a type of ionic silver. And I was like metal silver? He goes, silver's a mineral, first of all. He said, so it's a mineral and a metal. I'm like, okay, so okay.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and for these people that always worry about heavy metal toxicity, so it's a heavy metal because your body doesn't need it. So when you look at copper, you look at zinc, you look at silver, you look at platinum, you look at iridium, these are all things that you have to have in your body and you cannot survive without. When it's good for the body, it's a mineral. And when it's not, it's a heavy metal and it's just toxic to your body. That's why lead and mercury and those are toxic metals. So like I said, I learned a lot from this guy. And so that started my road on silver. And says, well, what is it? He goes, well, it's a type of ionic silver. So, over the next couple of weeks, I'm, searching, looking at silver. I'm, a really good researcher. My partner, Michelle, she was a fantastic researcher. And then I finally said, okay, there's other people that are selling this. He goes, well, no, they're not selling what I make. I said, they said ionic silver, colloidal silver. And he goes, yeah, and nano silver. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I make mine different. And I was like, okay, and? He goes, well, he said, no. He said, I said, why don't we get this out there? I said, people need this. And he goes, no, they will kill you. I'm like, they? He goes, they. I'm like, who's they? Like, wow, you really don't know much, do you? I'm like, apparently not, but I'm sure you're going to tell me. And he's like, big pharma. So they don't want this out there. So I'm like, okay. So I started doing, Michelle and I both started doing more research. And then I called him up one day and said, okay, other than the whole killing you thing, why else wouldn't you want to do silver? He said, because it's unstable. He said, it's like you, it doesn't get along with anything. He always had to insult me no matter
what. What a good ball buster he was.
Oh my God. And he was serious. He had no sense of humor whatsoever. He's like, yeah, he says, it's unstable. He said, it reacts with light, heat, temperature, barometric pressure, 2 degrees temperature difference. You have a different product. It's unstable. It's not perfect. I'm like, but okay, reading about this stuff, they use this stuff like 3,000 years before Christ. They use colloidal silver. They lined their water vessels with it so that the water wouldn't stagnate. I'm like, so they've been using it for, he goes, yeah, but it's not perfect. I'm like, okay, well, why don't you make it perfect? And he's like, because it's unstable. He said, it doesn't want to get along with anything. He says, it's too reactive. So that started our journey. And I'd called him and asked him some questions about, he showed me how to make it and I started making it for my friends and people. And it was a hobby. It was a side thing, but it worked really well. And then, I was thinking maybe 2 years later, we were, my partner, she went to Israel and I just hopped on a computer and the first Life is in the Blood just kept coming over and over and over to me. And so I started researching hemoglobin in blood and Michelle called me just as I hopped on the computer and she goes, Jeff, I'm at the Wailing Wall here. She goes, and there's nobody around me, but the verse Life is in the Blood just is like going over. We need to research blood. And I'm like, I literally just got on the computer to do that.
Talk about an energy field right there.
Oh my gosh.
That you're doing the same thing at the same time halfway across the world.
Right. And so we did that for a year. And then the following year it was the same thing with exact same scenario with ozone. I hopped on the computer. She calls me and says, Jeff, we really need to look at ozone. So it says, there's nobody around me, but I could have swore somebody said, research ozone. So we did that for 6 months to a year and then called this gentleman back and said, okay, I think we figured out how to stabilize silver. He's like, I'm smarter than you and I haven't been able to do it in 50 years. What makes you think you can get it? I'm like, different perspective. I don't know. He goes, and how is this? And I said, using ozone. He said, don't waste my time.
Ozone is O3, right?
Yeah. He says, it figures you would pick ozone because that's unstable too. I was like, what do you mean unstable? You see, you don't even know anything about it. He goes, ozone has a half-life, meaning 5 minutes from now, it's half effective as it was 5 minutes ago. He goes, and ozone's unstable, silver's unstable, and you're unstable, so don't waste my time. I was like, okay, like no filter whatsoever, no compassion, no nothing. So about 6 months later, he calls me and he goes, I think I figured out how to stabilize silver. And I said, okay, how's that? He said, using ozone. I was like, all right, I know you're older than dirt and you don't remember things, but about 6 months I brought this up and he interrupted me. He goes, you might as well said peanut butter because you had no idea what ozone was. I'm like, okay. I said, but if it'll work, I said, great, let's do it. He's like, no, see, this is the problem with people like you. You think everything's easy. Oh, let's just go do it. Let's not know anything about it. He goes, it's a theory. He goes, you're not a scientist. Okay, that's probably the truest thing you've ever said to me. And he says, it's a theory. You have to rationalize the theory. You have to validate the theory. You have to prove the theory. He goes, this is going to be expensive and I don't have that kind of money. Do you? And I said, well, I got some money. What are you talking about? And he goes, $7,000.
Oh my.
Now I know I was smiling ear to ear. So I literally in my arrogance, I cut a check for $10,000. I drive out to his place, knock on his door. He opens the door. I stick a check for $10,000 in his face and I go, here. And he looks at the check. He looks at me. He looks at the check. He looks at me and goes, "Are you dumb or hard of hearing?" And I'm going, "Oh my God, did you say 70,000?" I'm like, "You said 7,000, right?" He goes, "Does this look like $7,000? Are you independently wealthy? You're going to be a horrible businessman."
This guy just relentless.
Yeah. And I was like, "It's only $3,000. Pay yourself. Or if you need something, buy it." I said, "I'm really committed to this." He goes, "Well, that's ridiculous. I could buy $3,000 worth of gumballs." And I said, "Well, that would explain your wooden teeth. Now what?" And he shut the door in my face. No smile, no nothing, no sense of humor. So we had that conversation 7 times. And then finally, the last time he says, "Okay, it'll work." I said, "Great." I said, "So we can do it." He goes, "No, see, this is why I don't deal with people like you." He goes, "The equipment to do what we need to do doesn't exist." And he goes, "I can't build it." I said, "Well, I'm a general contractor. I can build anything." So I built the process and the equipment that restructures the ion, taking it apart, restructuring the hydrogen and bond angles of water. And it actually worked. And it worked better than we could have ever thought it was going to work. And that was how we came up with Micronic Silver.
So super interesting. So what is the mechanism or mechanisms of your silver product? Like what does it do in the body?
Over the colloidal, the ionic, and the nano?
Or just in period?
Well, silver's been known for immunity for a long time. When you look at the bubonic plague, which was 1348 to 1350, and this is where I got really mad when people were saying, "Oh, COVID, it's the plague, it's the plague." So 13% of the population died, over 300 million people in almost every country combined. So, I mean, was this close to 13% of our population? It wasn't even 1%.
And of whatever percentage it was, they didn't die from that anyway.
No, people overweight, people with diabetes, people that had some kind of asthma or some kind of other condition that it's the first time in the history of America where somebody would go to the hospital for something and they would send them home and say, "Come back," and it got worse.
So I'm deeply rooted into all things COVID, and the data shows that whatever amount of deaths they say there were, which were greatly exaggerated, the lady from the CDC even came out and said, what is defined as a COVID death? Well, if you go to the hospital with a gunshot wound and they COVID test you and you're positive and you die, that's a COVID death. She even said it.
Yeah, if you're hit by a bus.
So, but they said that of all the COVID deaths, the average of comorbidities was 4+ on all the people who died. So a lot of these people were dying from their comorbidities.
Well, and lack of treatment. I literally had a 78-year-old guy that they went in having a hard time breathing, and they said, "You got COVID, go home." And I got him on our product. We nebulized with him. We were actually able to get the ivermectin from a compounding pharmacy. The Walgreens would not fill it. They said, "Oh no, that's off script." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, "Yeah, it's off script. We can't do that." I'm like, it won the Nobel Peace Prize as an antifungal and an antibiotic.
What, ivermectin?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I know the whole
Yes,
story of ivermectin.
Yeah, it's not off script. I said, "That's what they prescribe it for." "Oh no, we can't do it." So I went to a compounding pharmacy, and in a week, this guy was better. But at 78 years old, with his oxygen under 90%. Now, if you're an asthmatic and you go into the hospital and it's under 94%, they would not let you leave without a nebulization treatment of albuterol. So this man they sent home at 78 years old and said, "Well, if it gets worse, come back." Oh, they're telling you to go home and die. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. And again, I know I'm getting way off track. When they first started doing the respirators at the level where you come in and we're going to put you on these incubators or whatever they were called.
Which is the worst thing they could have done. Right.
So understanding how COVID works in the system, much like pneumonia. It affects the pneumocyte 6 cells in the lungs. You have 2 types of cells, pneumocyte 1, pneumocyte 6. Pneumocyte 6 converts the carbon dioxide to oxygen. Pneumocyte 1 converts the surfactant to the gooey liquid that the carbon dioxide into, converts the oxygen and the carbon dioxide into surfactant, which is the gooey liquid which keeps the lungs flexible. And so when you have pneumonia, they don't put you on a respirator because your lungs go from just below your shoulder blade to your back, and they expand and contract. You have the little holes in the lung called alveoli, and then you have the connecting tissue called stitial tissue. So when you expand down, when you have pneumonia, they want you to work through it because if the lung stops working, that surfactant hardens like concrete, and there's nothing they can do. So they knew putting the first person on a respirator that it was going to kill them. And people ask me, well, why would they do that? I said, it's easy, because when you look at the age of the person that they're putting on a respirator is over 68 years old. That's the old wealth in our society. Those are the people you're not going to reprogram, right?
Right.
You wouldn't let the family see them. You wouldn't let them sign any kind of will or any kind of thing. Everything goes into probate, goes back to the government. If you're under 30 years old, you've already been indoctrinated. So they don't have to reprogram you. So that leaves the people between 30 and 68 years old, which are your independent small business firearms owners. So how do we affect those people? It takes 67 days to create a habit. Let's get them not working. So they shut them down for 2 years. Now you got a society that's not used to working anymore. And so this to me was, and this is my opinion, this was an attempt to take back the wealth.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'll think on that. There are a lot of different ways to perceive everything with COVID, but it always comes to one focal point, and that's control, right? That's it. So,
yeah, and I think it was a bigger test to see what our response is. And the one thing about America, when we exhaust every other option, we usually do the right thing in the end, because our society demands it. And we've seen it there. When you lock people up, at a certain point, people are looking at what's going on. And the mistake they made is telling the mothers that their children were bad people, because the worst class to be in was the middle class white male. There was no programs for you. There was no nothing for you. We are the bane of existence. And they've been really telling women that what bad people we are for a long time. And you can tell a woman that her husband's a bad guy. Okay? He can fight his own battles. He's a provider. He's good to me. When you start attacking the children, which they did, they made a mistake. They underestimated the middle class female. Doesn't matter, white, black, Hispanic, doesn't matter. When you start attacking their children, they fight. And that's what happened, and that's where they underestimated it. And I think this was a test for a bigger thing that they wanted to do coming down the road.
That's interesting, but they have, many women have come aboard with this because women are more empathetic than men, or maybe it's a different kind of empathy, and they go along with this. I just read a book called Toxic Empathy, which she's very scripture and faithful, and she'll tie in a lot of the Bible stuff. It's that rooting for the underdog at all costs, right? That's toxic empathy,
Yeah.
So, but they are, yeah, you're 100% right, because now they're rattling the cage of women, mothers, going, like, I was on board up until this point, but now you're screwing with my kids? No. So that's one of the forces against the dark forces. But Satan seems to be inserting himself in everything, right? And you can win them. And this is out of the communist playbook, right? You start the kids as early as possible. If it's too late in someone's life and they're unchangeable, then you just take them out of the system, like you're saying.
Oh yeah, communism is really great until you run out of other people's money to spend. Nobody has ever gotten prosperous through communism except the corrupt leaders that instill it.
Correct.
And in other countries, they were able to militarily implement communism in their societies. They can't do it in America. Too many people have guns. Too many people will uprise. So how do you do it? You make people afraid. And any time communism has been instituted in a country, they can vote it in, but they always have to shoot their way out of it.
So I want to stay on this point for a while because it's super important, because I've gone through the scenarios. Communism isn't coming. Communism's here. It's been here for a long time. We just didn't see it. And, they're doing it in the schools and now with the laws they pass. I don't think it's something we can stop. But then I default to what you said. The difference between, Stalin's Russia and he started to really flip the country on its ear around 1943. I'm reading the Gulag Archipelago finally. I believe they just had one major battle. The Russians, was it the Battle of Stalingrad? I don't know which one it was, but that's when Stalin started to round up people and, murdering them, imprisoning them, and all that stuff to take ultimate control. Well, that's happening here, right? Look what happened to Judy Mikovits and all the people that were like, hey man, here's the truth. And they're like, oh no, you're going away. So I thought through this and I'm like, the difference between communist Russia and communist China, when all of that stuff was happening, is we have the most armed population in the world. Plus we have a history, our history, we define patriotism, right? We fought the biggest, most powerful force in the world, basically with 3 to 5% of the population armed, right? So we probably have over 1 billion firearms in this country, and we have tens of millions at a minimum of people who are willing to fight and die for their freedom. So I'm going to myself, That's the difference between taking over that country and trying to take over this country. They're not going to be able to do it. But then the counterpoint I have in my head is we've already been in a civil war, and it's not a war with guns and ammo on the street. It's a psychological war. And if it does get to the streets, can they beat us? If everybody who considers themselves a red-blooded patriotic American goes to the streets and fights, can they beat us? They can, because they have technologies we don't even know about. They could have 10 million drones and just come in and like tear us apart. But then I asked myself, and I'm going to ask you, of all these patriotic Americans, if they have a fighting force, a ground force, where does that come from? Because the communists always had a fighting force that was able to control the majority of the population. Will some of our military turn toward against the people? Probably, right?
Well, that's some of the reprogram they've been doing for 10, 20 years, is the desensitization of soldiers if they have to fire on their own citizens. And that's something that they have been working on. And their corruption is so mass with what they do, and they're so evil in their thinking that they plan for this stuff. We learned from the Chinese. It's not the short-term game; it's the long-term game that you're going to do, that you want to do, and that's why they start off with socialism and then go to communism. And we've seen it in the terms here. Oh, I'm a socialist Democrat. That's a confliction of term, first of all, and you realize that on a social or socialism or communism, if the mass population votes and says murder is okay, then murder is okay. Man takes God out of society, and man becomes autonomous, and then man can do whatever man wants to do. And man, being as flawed as we are, we're going to do what the skin or the flesh tells us to do. If it feels good, let's do it. And that's all situational. And that's what we see with a lot of what we're doing. I wrote an article. It's about an 8-page article. I'll send it to you. It's called "The Vampire Theory of Economics and Relativity," and how economics ties into socialistic agendas, and people don't understand economics. So if you want to, it's based on two things. Can a vampire starve to death? And what happens when that vampires eat all the humans? They become self-consuming. And we've seen it over and over again. Hashtag Me Too, the Black Lives Matter, all these things. So what happens is these global elitists, who I refer to as vampires, because people understand vampires. They want to consume your soul. That's what this communist agenda does. Humans are a commodity now. There's always going to be more of us. You just keep enough of us alive to breed. And that's the way the agenda that you're taking. Everybody's disposable. And with communism in itself, its core value is they never want to reach their agenda. So let's say our society's here, and they say, hey, we want to go here. The goal's not getting there. The goal's moving this one. And then they extend it. And so they want to slinky their way into it because their victory is the struggle.
This is part of neuroscience too. And these are my own words of describing what I've read about. The heroin for the human brain is once a human gets a taste of real wealth and power, it's like heroin. It becomes addicting. And then you do as much as you can to build your wealth and power. And there comes a time when you'll have so much wealth that it becomes all about power, okay? And to get there, the brain actually transforms into psychopathy. You lose your humanity, and you will do anything to increase your wealth and power, and the lives of people become meaningless. So that's what happens to the brain. And most of our population that, I'm always trying to rattle cages and wake people up, they can't even conceptualize that the entities that are actually in charge of the world, they don't care about people whatsoever. And it's a really hard pill to swallow. And people don't want to look at the truth of things because the truth is very dark, And so communism is the perfect business model for the evil controllers of the world. It is the perfect thing because they suppress us, and all the fruits of our labor go all the way up to them. They eliminate the middle class, and they become wealthier. And I'm just wondering, what's happening up there? Because they got to be cannibalizing each other periodically.
Well, we've seen that with President Trump. He wasn't part of the inner circle. So when you looked at what happened is I believe he ran to protect his empire because he realized he's not part of that inner circle. So again, what happens when the vampires eat all the humans or take all the stuff they can take away from them? They become self-consuming and they eat the lower level vampires. So I think he was smart enough to realize that, well, wait a minute, this will eventually consume me. So by getting the general population of America behind him to back him is protecting him. And, if you look at Solinsky's rules of radicalism, it's all stated right there. I mean, he talks about how to go in and take over. This is what they did in Venezuela. Venezuela was a paradise. And they said, oh, we're going to do this, and this is for the best of society, and those entities, and these are the same people that started Black Lives Matter, by the way. What's the first thing they do? You wipe out the history. Take down the statues. If you cannot see where you came from, you cannot see how far you've come. And then suddenly, okay, this is evil. These people are evil. They're doing this to us. When they can get people to believe they're victims, because there's powerhood in victimism. If I'm a victim, I have power. Now you have a voice, and they convince people that they're a victim. Get them enraged, get them all riled up where they're, okay, we're going to protest, we're going to do this and that. And it comes to a point where they're going to be like, well, you're going to eat these bugs and you're going to like it. You're going to be grateful for us for allowing you to have it. And because of the article that I wrote, so it always comes back to one. So once you get rid of all the riffraff underneath and it becomes the control of the actual power, these entities become self-consuming up to the point that there's only one. And what happens then? So when you mention about power, so now you're getting into transhumanism where everything's programmable. What power is that? There's no power in that you can. God was smart enough to realize to give us free will. When you think about bad things happening, to people, and bad things do happen, but that was part of the consequence of sin. We could have been in paradise, except Eve took a bite of the apple. Adam's just as much to blame with it. But part of that is that freedom of choice means that bad things are going to happen. Bad things happen to you isn't God letting them happen to you. That's part of the consequence of sin. Surely you will die. All of us will. But what he gave us the ability is, if we stand on a good foundation, is that we can overcome everything. It's victory after victory. Your faith builds like an onion, just like your immunity. Every victory is strengthening you with your immunity and with your faith.
You touched on something before, and I want to bring it back. The biggest threat to the controllers, and that's what I call them in the book, are white Christian men. And that's why it's visible assault here in the United States, but we have events like World War II. That was almost the biggest loss of white Christian men in world history, right? So, we are under siege, and we're not going to claim victimhood and say, oh, poor me. I'm just pointing out that I'm aware of it, and I'm going to bring it on.
Yeah, well, we're not afraid of them. See, when they can get you to be more afraid of them than afraid of God, they can't. That's why they try to take God out of society. That's why they try to interrupt your faith. Because once they do that, then, there's an old saying, well, they can kill you, but they can't eat you because that's illegal. And that's what the fear they want to put into you is like, don't you dare come up against me. So when you remove God out of society, now you've got people that you can brainwash and program. And that's actually part of why they put fluoride into our system. They used it in the early 50s and 60s to brainwash soldiers because fluoride makes you more susceptible to suggestion. It calcifies the pineal gland in the brain, and you become programmable. And then they said, well, wait a minute, why not, since we do it with soldiers, why don't we get into the public school system? These kids are getting a little bit more violent, a little bit more unease, more ADHDs.
Which is vaccine related, in my opinion, but whatever.
Well, and at that point, they didn't know it was ADHD. I mean, they were just like, people are getting more independently thinking. You're prospering, you're getting better. Remember after World War II, they had the victory gardens, handed out seeds and everybody grew their own food. Now they're like, oh no, you can't do that. We have a food shortage. We have a gas shortage. If we have a gas shortage, the earth is dying. The core of the earth is a nuclear reactor whose waste product is crude oil and natural gas. If you remember back to the prehistoric ages, they had the tar pits. Those tar pits were lakes of oil that sometimes would get struck by lightning and burn for 10,000 years. So what happens is when we're not pumping the oil builds up, pressurizes, and leaches into the water system. So the dinosaurs dying was not always about the ash. It was about the toxification of their water where they had no water to drink. And then you had the lightning strikes and the stuff, the oil fields turning or the tar fields burning for 10,000 years. And then it got to the point where you just had mass eruptions and pressure. So by actually taking the oil out of the ground, we're actually, extending the life of the earth. It's actually a good thing for us. But they got us to believe like, well, if we're running out of oil. No, we have a bigger problem. That means the Earth is cooling, and that means we're in for a whole another
Which
ride.
is the also the opposite thing they're telling us, that we're heating up, right? So,
global warming. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Have you looked outside lately? You seen the temperature? The Earth goes through cycles, and you know, it's like, again, cutting into a tree. There's rings and stuff, and when they cut into the Earth, they can tell different things. And the Earth goes in 1,000, 10,000, 100-year, 1,000, million, 10 million year cycle. It goes into these big cycles.
Yep.
And it's always agenda driven. Well, this is for this reason. This is for that. You know, the whole solar thing, you know, giving out the solar panels and stuff. Anytime your government has to subsidize something, it means that people don't want it. And they do that for corruption. That's all they do it for. It's all about the money.
Yep. And I wrote this in my book, and I don't necessarily remember the order of things, but in the 70s, they were saying we're headed into a new ice age. 70s is only 50 years ago, right? New ice age.
Right.
Then came the ozone layer. Well, you know, all of our aerosols are creating a hole in the ozone layer, and we're going to burn to death. Then 10 years elapsed then, and then it became acid rain, and that's going to kill us from the pollution. Then 10 years, it's always like almost right on the 10-year dot, you know. Then it became, you know, global warming, you know, the icebergs are going to melt, and the coastlines are going to be flooded. In 20 years, they gave us 20 years, and that was over 20 years ago.
Yeah, and
right?
who thought the biggest threat would be Greta Thunberg then?
And now they don't even say global warming, they say climate change. Well, the climate is always changing.
Yeah, we have 4 seasons.
Since the beginning of time. There's a comedian, I don't know if he's even still alive, but he was very old, so he would have to sit in a stool. And he said, hey, for all you young people who are concerned about climate change and global warming, don't worry, I got some news for you. In the summertime, it gets hot. And in the wintertime, it gets cold, you know, and we're under such a psyop. Everything they tell us is either largely a lie or the opposite of the truth, right? The opposite of the truth is like the biggest lie you can tell. You know?
Oh, yeah. Well, even like you mentioned ozone. So oxygen is O2. Ozone is O3. One single extra nascent oxygen molecule. So when they talk about the holes in the ozone layer, it's always over a desert, because there's no plants for carbon dioxide. So when you take the carbon dioxide and you put it with the ozone, you get what's called hydroxyl, which is the most potent purifier known in the world. It destroys everything. Ozone turns carbons to water and oxygen, gives up that single nascent oxygen molecule, and reverts back to water and oxygen. So they got us to believe that ozone, you know, that the aerosols are going to cause holes in the ozone layer, or cars farting, or cows farting, or our cars emitting,
yeah.
You know, that. So there is 10 times more termites per acre than every other organism in the world.
I did not know that. I know it was insects, but
yeah, and their waste is methane gas, and when they chew the wood, it creates methane gas. So termites are the biggest problem we would have as far as the climate change, but you never hear a word about it. And they're always like, oh, well, the cars are farting and this and that. So when they talk about holes in the ozone layer, it's the absence of hydroxyls. So it's always going to be where there's no plant life. If you walked into an area where there was no ozone, your skin would start blistering. It'd be like walking into a microwave. So that ozone is a protective layer. And fast forward to the pandemic in Wuhan, China. Now, before they shut everything down, everybody wore masks, and you could not see a quarter mile. It was so pollutant was so bad in there. Well, 3 days after they shut everything down, guess what? You could see for 100 miles. It was crystal clear. That's ozone in the atmosphere destroying the carbons and turning the water and oxygen. Ozone is the Earth's purification system. And they always want to say, oh, ozone's terrible for you. It's a noxious gas. It's activated oxygen. Every time there's a lightning strike, metric tons of ozone are being created in the atmosphere. And then the sun shining through the water droplets, every time you see a rainbow, that's ozone being created. And they want to get us to believe that, oh, this is not enough to sustain the world. Oh, well, we had the shutdown, or the dinosaurs being eradicated, every living thing, because of the volcanoes and all kinds of this and that, and the Earth survived. And that was all ozone.
So I want to just a sidebar on ozone. And you know this already, but this is just for our viewers. When there's a house fire, you know, smoke smell gets on everything. You know, you get a remediation company or whatever, they come in, they encapsulate the house, and they have ozone generators.
Yeah.
And they let those ozone generators run while the house is encapsulated.
Yeah, 2 to 5 days on average.
And then the house smells like a rainforest when it's done.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, and so ozone will kill the odor. It'll also kill every living thing in there.
Correct. That's why.
Yeah, and that's why they say, oh, well, it's bad for you. There's a treatment called prolozone, and there was doctors that were doing it. So say your cartilage or tendon in your knee was gone and you're in extreme pain. They would put a bag around your knee and pump ozone through it for 4 hours, and people literally walked out of the dentist's office or the doctor's office not in pain. They use ozone in dentistry to fight off infections in the bones and stuff like that. So it's a single nascent oxygen molecule, different than oxygen.
All right, so let's get back to the mechanisms of Micronic Silver, because we started getting into it, and I did a little research on it. Some of the properties of silver are antimicrobial.
Yeah,
can you take me through? Yeah.
So antimicrobial, antifungal, antiviral, antiparasitical, also antiseptic. Ours is, at least. So they've used ozone in medicine for a long time. So like I said, going back to the plague, they actually prescribed people to walk around with silver spoons in their mouth. So that term, born with a silver spoon in your mouth, which means does not apply to you, was during the plague because the wealthy people didn't get the plague. Less than 1/4%
Interesting.
died. So the doctors would prescribe people for silver spoons. And the tradition of giving silver pacifiers to babies was also in that time frame so they wouldn't get the plague. Now, when they would eat off the silverware, their teeth would scrape. They'd get bigger particles of silver. Your body tries to expel it. Much like vitamin C, it uses what it wants and expels it. The particle size was big. It was a colloid, where you get colloidal silver. And they would go out in the sunlight and it would dye their skin a bluish gray color. And that's why they call them blue bloods.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And then you go fast forward to up to the late 1800s, before refrigeration. Scientists would use silver dollars to put in their petri dishes before they did experiments to sterilize the petri dish.
Wow.
Because of its antimicrobial, antibacterial, fungal, viral, parasitical effect. And then when they delivered milk, now you had the ice boxes on your porch, but the delivery vehicles didn't have it. So they would actually drill holes in silver dollars, put a string on it, and stick it in every bottle of milk while they were delivering it. And they would pull them out and put them in the ice box. And I mean, they've used it for a long time. Before 1923, silver was the #1 prescribed antibiotic in the world. Rockefeller tried to patent it when they created Big Pharma.
They started that whole thing in like 1918, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, taking over the healthcare system.
Right. So he tried to patent silver, and he couldn't because two things. It's all natural, and you can't patent natural, and it's part of our monetary system. So 3 years later, they discovered penicillin, and they realized that they could patent it. They control the supply. So what we need to do is elevate the demand by getting doctors to prescribe it, getting people that, you need to take this, you need to be on penicillin, you need to do this. So, and they would limit the supply. So when your demand outweighs your supply, you can name your price. And when you get people afraid, people will overpay for things. And that's exactly been the format ever since they've developed it, the big pharmaceutical systems. And if you actually look in the journals of medicine before 1965, there was over 5,000 references to silver in the journals of medicine. Wow. Now there's less than 100 because they want to keep taking it out.
Interesting. So that's kind of how the silver works. And then tell me the forms that you have your product in and the proper applications to those forms.
Well, we started off with the Micronic Silver dietary supplement, and it's ours is a micron. So there's confusion between colloidal, ionic, and nano silvers, and then Micronic Silver. We have the only organically stabilized silver on the planet. We're the only people in the history of the world that figured out how to stabilize silver. So silver reacts with light, heat, temperature, barometric pressure. Again, 2 degrees difference, you have a different product. So when we stabilized it, ours acts and functions a certain way. The colloidal silver, ionic, and nano silver only stays active in the body for 6 to 8 minutes. And then it starts precipitating. You take it under the tongue. It's a sublingual delivery only because when you swallow it, it hits the stomach acid, creating silver chloride, destroying the silver. So it stays active in the body for 6 to 8 minutes and then starts to precipitate down, which it gets washed out the lymphatic and waste system. In that 6 to 8 minutes, when it starts entering a cell through the membrane, now the suspension doesn't matter. It can take up to 2 days for the silver to get in through the lining of the cell, through the membrane. And once it gets into the bacteria, fungus, or virus inside the composition of the cell of it, it disrupts the chemical lung of the single cell organism in a type of suffocation. It hits it with an ionic charge, killing it. Now that silver is trapped inside that cell. The Micronic Silver is different in that ours is a sublingual and an ingested delivery. Ours is not destroyed by stomach acid. So ours stays active in the body for 8 to 10 hours, not 6 to 8 minutes. And because it's exocellular, meaning outside the cell, rather than being absorbed in the cell where it gets trapped and washed out the lymphatic system, a micron is a form of an ion, which means missing electrons. Electron is your battery for life. Every cell organism has it. So when what happens is the micronic silver has a high atomic mass. And when it comes in contact with the bacteria, fungus, or virus, it actually steals the electron, pulling it through the membrane wall, destroying the bacteria, fungus, or virus on contact. And then the micronic silver takes in the electron, which a micron is a form of an ion, which means missing electrons. It cannot hang on to it. It ejects that electron into the nearest thing, which is a blood cell giving you energy. And then ours goes after the next bacteria, fungus, or virus for 8 to 10 hours. So it is a wholly different product than the colloidal, the ionic, or the nano silver. And that's why we're the only people in 100 years to create a brand new category of silver called Micronic. So it's Micronic. We own it. It's our product. The dietary supplement is taken internally. It works with your immune system to boost your immune system, which is how all silvers work. They elevate the immune system, getting it to work the way that God has intended it.
In what forms do they come? You said, is it a capsule form?
A liquid.
It's a liquid.
Yeah.
And then tell me how you...
Typically, as a preventative, we take the Micronic Silver dietary supplement once a day, a teaspoon. It doesn't matter, morning, day, or night. And unlike the other forms of silver, you can put it in your coffee, you can put it in your frozen drinks, because it's not reacting with light, heat, temperature, and that stuff. It'll be stabilized. And the dietary supplement, like I said, it works with the immune system is the benefit of it. And that's why they don't allow testing in humans with silver. It's always got to be in a petri dish, because they can say, oh, it's marginal. The way your immune system works is the white blood cells, they create an organic hydrogen peroxide. And when they come onto a bacteria, fungus, or virus, little needles come out, syringes, and they spray an organically made hydrogen peroxide on it. Now, you don't drink hydrogen peroxide. Your body makes it through minerals and chemicals that you eat and absorb, and it's called transference, where it turns those into a hydrogen peroxide. The interesting thing is how peroxide works with silver. And there's a gentleman, a Frenchman, who has a motorcycle, and this is amazing. It has no engine in it. It runs on silver and hydrogen peroxide. It creates a catalytic explosion, basically, that creates thrust. So his motorcycle that has no engine runs the quarter mile at 284 miles an hour in 3.5 seconds. And when he pushes that button, you just see all the big smoke come out the back end through the thruster, and it's all propulsion. And so I tell people, the silver is like rocket fuel for immunity.
That's insane.
Yeah, I'll look it up. Look, motorcycle that runs on hydrogen peroxide. It's an amazing video.
And of course, if that guy tried to create your mass produce an automobile that does that, he'd wind up disappearing too.
I don't know how cost effective it would be.
I gotcha.
But also, much like hydrogen, right now there's no way of controlling the explosion, because propulsion is just a rapid expansion of molecules. And that's how it works. It creates thrust because it's expanding so fast, it's putting it through a small little, tube, you'd say, and it's rushing out so fast that it's propelling the vehicle forward. Much like a fusion bomb, in the atmosphere, it's just molecules expanding at a rate where you get this big explosion and creating heat.
So the only form that Micronic Silver comes in is liquid form?
Yeah, it's a liquid form. Our dietary supplement is taken internally. It's 27 parts per million. That's how you gauge the strength of it. Our topical healing spray is 50 parts per million. We make it twice as strong.
Okay, well, that's what I meant by form. So you have a topical healing spray. So what is the mechanism there? Because is it the same as just going in through the skin? Or
yeah, it's the same. It's just stronger because you have an amount of evaporation versus penetration. So we made it twice as strong. What other companies do is they take what would be their dietary supplement, and they put a spray bottle on it, and they sell it to you and go, this is our topical version. We made it stronger just because the amount of evaporation versus penetration. And then we have it in a nasal spray also, because viruses incubate in the nasal passage. That's your first line of defense.
Right.
For immunity. Your first line of defense for health is in through the mouth and the gut. Because that old saying, you are what you eat, is wrong. You are what you absorb. So your diet is the first line of health, where your nasal passages are your first line of immunity.
So when you treated the one guy that they sent home during the COVID, you said nebulized. This wasn't just a nasal spray. Was it a different delivery system where you put it in water or something? How did that get delivered?
A nebulizer is an air pump that creates a mist. So it has a tube, it has a chamber, and a breathing device for the mouth, and you put it in the chamber. And then when you turn it on, it presses air through it and creates a mist.
And so it's kind of like a mask type thing where you'll inhale it, right?
Right. And go through the nose and the mouth, or just the mouth, or just the nose. But asthmatics are really familiar with it, because when they go in for treatments, they use it. And you can buy a home nebulizer for about $34. So during the pandemic, we had people that were nebulizing with it, and they did fantastic. By the second inhalation, they were coughing up with the thick phlegm.
So the vehicle of whatever COVID was, or any virus that, like that, the nebulizing method is very effective.
Yeah, because
it multiplies in there too, right?
Well, not only that, but like we talked about pneumonia going into the lungs, the COVID went into the lungs. And so that's your first distribution into the blood. So the nebulizing goes right into the lungs. And that's where we've seen a really big benefit with it. And like I myself, I'm a childhood asthmatic. And with the construction company, I was using my rescue inhaler 7 to 8 times a day. After I woke up and I started nebulizing with it during the pandemic, I don't use my rescue inhaler anymore. And that never happens. Any doctor will tell you, once you start using the inhalers, you pretty much have to be on them the rest of your life because it doesn't get less and less. It gets worse and worse where you need more to the point that your lungs carry no more oxygen because it's creating scar tissue. I don't use my inhalers anymore.
Awesome. And when you use it topically, does it have any effect on muscles and all that? Or are you going to feel better if you have aching pain and you put it there? Or
no,
it's a different thing?
Yeah, this is more of immunity, skin issues, rashes, that kind of thing. It works great on. I spray it in my eyes. So if with the allergies, if I touch an animal, a cat or a dog, and I touch my eyes get all red and itch, and I spray it in my eyes and on contact, the itching's gone. We do have people that when they have shingles, the shingles is a virus. They'll spray it on topically and take it internally, and now you're sandwiching. The virus can't retreat into the body, and you're actually sandwiching it. And they see great results to the point that in a day or two, it's usually gone.
So other things that would be regarded as fungal, like athlete's foot, you would want to spray that on there as well, right?
Yeah, internally and topically. Typically, when you put something on topically, the bacteria or the virus tries to retreat into the system to get away from it and hides in the cell walls. And then the breakouts come back. And when you take something internally, usually your breakouts get worse because it's trying to push it out of the body. So we found that the sandwiching effect tends to be the best effect for anything like that.
Awesome. Well, you definitely, you gave me a tutorial on that, so that's going to become part of my daily ritual.
Yeah, and because you mentioned muscles, we do have another one called MicroPro for our athletes. It shuts off the production of lactic acid at the hypothalamus in the brain.
Wow.
Because it's the Micronic Silver promotes the growth of the fibroblast cells, which are your precursor to stem cells. So the lactic acid tells your body to start producing the stem cells. Well, the Micronic Silver is already taking care of that, so your body doesn't even produce the lactic acid.
Which is what makes you sore, correct?
Well, right, because a little bit of lactic acid is good, but a lot is detrimental. And that's why you're sore for the next couple of days. And, bodybuilders are always talking about muscle failure. I got to work out the muscle failure, and each rep is getting harder and harder. Well, when they can't lift anymore, that's not muscle failure. That's hydraulic pressure that the lactic acid has built up, so there's no room for the muscles to move. So the athletes that we have that use it, they realize that they're doing more reps, and then it's finally just stops where they're not getting the fatigue from the muscle, but it just stops because their muscles reaching true muscle failure.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. And that's called a recovery accelerator, not a performance enhancer. It doesn't enhance what you're doing. It just lets you run at your highest level, and it floods the body with oxygen. So one of the reasons athletes can perform better is the average person carries 6 oxygen molecules for every molecule of hemoglobin. Athletes have shown the ability to carry 8 and 10. That's why they can perform, but they also burn through it faster, and that's why they get the cramping, is they burn off the oxygen, start burning off the nitrogen, and they get cramping in their muscles. All
right, so we're going to take a little side street here. I'm talking to a man that didn't finish high school, right?
Yes.
And then he did dyslexia and stuff, but you've referenced books now. So are you an avid reader now? Did something change with the dyslexia?
No, it's really a weird thing. So when I met this biochemical engineer, I didn't.
Who was in love with you, by the way?
Oh yeah, he was my biggest champion. It was really funny because he was working on a formula, and I looked down his formula, and if it's numbers and letters, I can read it. And I looked down and I go, it's 23.9 grams. He's like, well, you don't know that. And I was like, well, I said, your formula's right there. He said, well, you can't read that. I'm like, well, this is this, this is this, this is this, right? He goes, oh, you're asking me? I'm like, well, I'm right? And he didn't say a word. So 10 minutes or 15 minutes later, he gets done with his calculation, and it's 23.9 grams. And I go, okay, there you go. He goes, well, now we know it's right. I'm like, you just wasted 15 minutes of my life I'll never get back.
Okay.
Didn't crack a smile or anything. But yeah, I still have, to this day, have a hard time reading. I've got to read things 4 or 5 times over. Once I get it. But that's why, like some of the people that I've surrounded myself with have really elevated me. Judy Mikovits being one of them.
She's amazing. Dr. Judy, if you're watching, what an honor it was to meet you. So.
Yeah, Judy, this is about a year ago. They had the Reawaken in North Carolina. And I always go to those. And Judy calls me the day before and she's like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? I'm like, well, I was just heading down to North Carolina. She goes, can you swing by Battle Creek, Michigan? And I was like, well, it's kind of on the way. I said, I guess. And I looked around and said, yeah, I can do that. She goes, great. She goes, we're protesting Kellogg and Del Bigtree, and RFK is going to be here and I want to introduce you to him.
Awesome.
I'm like, oh, I don't care if it's out of the way. And unfortunately, they weren't able to make it. But I stopped by there and I asked her, so are you going to the Reawaken? She goes, well, if I can catch a plane. I was like, why don't you ride with me down there? So I spent 15 hours in the car with her. She didn't shut up the whole time.
That's her nature, though.
Right.
Dr. Judy, getting the microphone out of your hand is hard. I'm just saying.
Well, and nobody, I mean, literally, her retention to information is out of this world.
Unmatched.
And, nobody can understand everything she says. Spending that time with her, I can understand some of what she says. And then it's usually 2 or 3 days later, I go, oh, this does this and this does that. And I get into it. I could never explain it like she does. But surrounding myself with people like that, because I'm not reading, I'm hearing, it actually does a lot better. And, it's interesting because even in school, God gave me almost a photographic memory. And so the good news is that I memorized everything it told me. I just couldn't read it. I just, heard more auditory stuff. But as I never got in the habit of taking notes. As you see, my notepad right here, what do I have on it? Nothing. Yours is like ready for next page. So I never got in the habit of taking notes. And what I didn't read, as you get older, your memory becomes less photographic and more pornographic.
Stealing that from you too.
And what I mean is you tend to remember the things that you probably shouldn't remember. I really struggle with, I still have a pretty good retention of stuff, but it takes a couple of days of me thinking on something before I put it together, especially after talking to Judy. But again, spending time with, Sherry Tenpenny. Sherry's really good at explaining things. I mean, she breaks it down for me. I'm like,
these are people I consider American heroes. So
the things that they sacrificed, and most people don't know this. I mean, Judy, for 5 years, she's had the FBI sitting outside her place every day. She'd go kayaking. She'd bring them out coffee. She's like, here you guys go. I mean, I believe they killed her husband, during COVID. So she sacrificed a lot. She sacrificed her career. They put her in jail for 2 years without even having a trial. When Fauci decided he was going to do what he did. The Democrats were big on, well, we're gonna protect the whistleblowers. She's the one who released that during the AIDS thing when they had the AZT5. There was I think 126 people they were testing the AZT5 on, and what people didn't know until Judy exposed it is he was giving those people daily blood transfusion to keep them alive. After he got the patent, which he made about $140 million on, that we paid for, by the way.
He is who?
Fauci.
Okay, just making sure everybody knows who we're talking about.
Yep. After he got the patent, the next day he stopped giving transfusions to those people. Every single one of them died within a week. And that's what Judy exposed, and that's why they threw her in jail. All the stuff that he says they did, all the research, that's all hers. And, I hope that that's going to be with the new administration in there and with RFK. Now, Judy and RFK are very good friends. Hopefully a lot of that stuff that she has will get out, but she sacrificed a lot. Sherry Tenpenny, they took her medical license from her. And, luckily she had a really, really, really good attorney that stood by her and got her medical license back. But she has six medical degrees. When she come out about the graphene oxide in the or the supermagnetic iron oxide in the vaccinations when she appeared in front of Congress. That was so bad. When you went to the company that made that, right on their homepage, it said, under no circumstances is this product to be used in trials on any living organism. And that's what they were putting in there, and that's what she exposed. So they immediately changed to the graphene oxide after that, and they villainized her. She's a great, great doctor. Brian Artis, they killed his father-in-law, when he came out and started speaking about it.
Well, that's what prompted him to take action. He's like, he watched it happen, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, all these people, Zev Zelenko.
That's where he was the guy who activated my interest in COVID. You mean you have a protocol that, there is healing people, the hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and zithromycin, I think was his protocol.
Yep. And you had of course, the ivermectin, the reduced glutathione and zinc. With, there's so many things that work. The reason they had to shoot all that stuff down is because constitutionally, you cannot create a vaccine if there's a therapeutic that works.
Right. You can't issue an emergency use authorization unless there's no treatments.
Right. Right.
So
And so when I met Zev Zelenko, I was actually
you met him, huh?
Yeah, I was actually working with him. He said the Micronic Silver was the missing link in the Z-Stack protocol. So I was working with him to get it as part of the protocol. And then one day, Ann Vandersteel, you know who she is?
I do not know who she is.
Yeah, she has the Steel Something podcast. She called me. She was on the board of the Zelenko Foundation. And she's like, Jeff, she goes, Zeb's got about 2 hours left. So I was actually able to pray over him.
Awesome.
Right before he passed away. So that's one of the biggest honors that I have.
And he was fighting cancer for a long time.
Yeah, 2012, at the Truth About Cancer, he got sprayed with something. There was 10 people that got sprayed with something. There's only one living one right now. They all died. But he recovered from it and then it fell back into it. But yeah, he was I thought he was very, very old. He was like 47 years old when he died.
He aged, and plus he had the beard and everything. He got my interested in COVID. We all got COVID early in this house, and I had 3 sons, one with his wife, with a baby, and pregnant, my daughter-in-law. We were all in this house, and when my daughter-in-law's water broke, my son took her to the hospital. She tested positive for COVID. They sent my son home. She had have the baby by herself, and then they sent her home the next day because they didn't have a protocol to a baby born to a COVID mother. Okay, it was insane. But after all that, having attorneys queued up and whatever, we finally got the baby after 2 weeks. They let the baby go home with my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law because they lived in a little condo in Lombard and they didn't leave their house, so they deemed them safe. I'm like, well, we all had COVID. I lost, what we perceive as COVID. I lost my sense of smell and stuff. Something did happen. We all either got sick or had, metabolic changes in us. So I'm like, we're done. We're good, right? Mm-hmm. We got the natural immunity.
Yeah, my houseplants had COVID, by the way.
Yeah. So now comes, I see Zev Zelenko. I start seeing videos and he's like, here's what my protocol is. I treated over 6,000 people, which would constitute a very good study, right? And I think he had an 88% success rate. And he says of the people that died, they were so far along with whatever it was that was in the lungs and stuff that he couldn't pull them out.
Well, and the COVID was secondary. So those people had other things like severe diabetes, really bad asthma.
And then I remembered Trump in his first presidency, he got COVID and he addressed the nation and they asked him, did you take anything? And he said, yeah, I took hydroxychloroquine. And I thought to myself, now I'm connecting these 2 dots and I'm like, this Zelenko was the one who Trump was working with, right? I'm like, well, wouldn't this be like world, global, earth-shattering news that like the president of the United States took something that beat COVID? No, we never heard about it again.
Yeah, that and the MMS, the sodium chloride. Like, oh, he's drinking bleach. No, it's sodium chloride. Sodium chloride with citric acid. It smells just like bleach. It's all natural, organic. They were actually treating them in the late 80s and 90s and for malaria in Africa. And the government there actually killed the missionaries that were treating people successfully because they were succeeding.
No surprise. Always shocking, but not a surprise. So then I became an activist with this COVID thing. I'm like, I don't know who Dr. Zelenko went to, but he went to, might have been the FDA or CDC with his study. And he said, after my presentation, I was in fear for my life. He moved from New York to Florida where he thought he would be a little bit safer. And then I would just rapid consuming everything about COVID, vaccines. And I just learned something recently about the time it takes for a true vaccine to come to market is not only, phase 3, phase 4 trials, then comes once we deem we have something viable. Now it's how do we create production lines, right? Where the thing's actually produced consistently across all different locations, and that takes 2 to 4 years just to create the production method of this thing.
Well, it takes 17 years to code where you put something into human DNA. The human DNA is 10.5 billion miles long, and when you don't have an insertion point, so it takes 17 years. So when COVID came out, and they had these things, the mRNA stuff to go in there, what it does is that is actually the continuation of Agent Orange. So it restructures the telomeres of the DNA. That's why there is all these side effects with, stillborn babies and blood clots and all this other stuff. And so it travels along to human DNA and it drops in, restructures the telomeres, drops out, moves along. Agent Orange is parts per quadrillion. It was never meant to be solved. So Judy realized that this is the continuation of Agent Orange technology, became mRNA, the modified ribonucleic acid in there. It changes the structure of the human DNA. And, to give you an idea how long that would take, that's like you being in New York, having an address here in California, no road maps, no street signs, and you finding this address driving across the United States. I mean, it's really insane that they allowed that to happen. And, I don't know what our existing president knew about it. I know that at some point there was a meeting, and I believe that he was told that if he didn't go along with it, he would be impeached, because that was right about the time of the impeachments. I don't have any proof or knowledge of it. I've just heard some things, and I think that that's part of why he went along with it. I like President Trump. I'm not going to blindly follow anybody, first of all.
Amen to that.
And when I think about it, I hear these people, how they blindly followed a leader. That's the devastation of any society. When you think that you're good and other people are bad, human by nature is inherently bad.
True.
That's the consequence of sin. So we need to address our leaders and talk to them about, look at what they're doing and judge them based on the actions, not about which political group they have. The act should be the offense.
I agree. And this is just a sidebar in politics. And to me, it's more not about politics, but human behavior. And I was just thinking about this morning for the 20th time. You have people who voted for Trump and people who absolutely hate Trump. Somewhere in between, there's variations of those things, okay? But if you hate Trump and that's your main motivation on who you vote for, then so be it. Anybody but Trump, I'm voting for anybody, right? Well, we vote for Trump, right? But then we watch everything Trump is doing. And I voted for him twice, and I never voted for president in my life. I voted for him 3 times because I was so cynical and still am about the system that if you're making it up to running for president, your morals and goodness have been fully compromised. So Trump to me represented, he's probably part of a corrupt system, but he's not part of this corrupt system, and maybe he'll be a bull in a china shop and he'll stop the momentum and maybe shift it in another direction. So I went into voting for Trump with skepticism right from the beginning. But what I'm saying to you is, if you're a Trump hater and you're going to vote for anybody but Trump, if Trump doesn't win, then you retire the whole political spectrum. You don't think about it anymore. You're like, all right, the guy didn't win, I'm good. So you start to ignore the fact that Joe Biden from the very beginning was cognitively impaired. Like, I could see it. Like, you just watch the videos and pay attention. And I wasn't anti-Trump,
pro-Biden or anything.
Pro-Biden, no. I wasn't even going to vote at that juncture. I'm like, this guy doesn't seem right to me, right? So you ignore all the things that your government does. You don't participate as a American should. You should be voting and knowing what you're voting for and hold your politicians accountable. But they retired politics because Trump didn't win. Everything's good now, right? But now Trump wins, and now we're the ones who voted for him. We're watching his every move. We don't agree with everything he does, and when we don't agree with what he does, we outwardly say something, right?
Yeah, well, and we're the ones with all the guns.
And that too,
yeah,
right?
The people that, blindly followed Joe, as you said, so be it. I say Soviet.
Soviet. That's another thing I'm going to steal from you. So I don't know.
I'm being robbed blind here.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about this. And we've touched on many of these things today. I believe the divide between people, and I'll just say American people, I don't think we can traverse that divide anymore.
With God, everything is possible. So I have people all the time, people are asking me, okay, what about the global reset? Shahar Jazara or whatever it's called. And I said, I heard about that 33 years ago. It was supposed to happen in 2 weeks. So, I'm not putting my faith in anything. I've heard people say, well, Hillary was executed 7 years ago and this person was this. And I said, okay, so celebrities never die. So Elvis and Michael Jackson are still around, but all of our politicians are dead unless they're a politician you like and then they're alive. So I don't buy in any of that. I'm putting my faith in God, and that, in the end, God wins. There's no scenario that God does not win. So I'm not going to be bogged down with all these other scenarios with people worrying about this and worrying about that. It's like, you know what? God will take care of me. God will tell me what to do. And, if it's my time to go, I know where I'm going. I don't have any qualms about it. And if I have to pick up and fight for my freedoms, I'll do it because I'm not worried about it.
I'm the same way. And in terms of the divide, I think it's all part of the psyop, the psychological operation. They keep us hating each other. The things that have brought us together in the past is when you identify a common enemy, right? So like
the Green Bay Packers. I just had to throw that in there. Sorry.
But like on 9/11, we have a common enemy. On December 7th, 1941, bombing of Pearl Harbor, we have a common enemy. That American spirit, well, we have a tendency to come together. But I believe
we forget quickly.
Yes.
Because we're fat and happy. I mean, when life isn't bad and you're pumped full of all these chemicals that they're putting in us in these foods, and we don't have to grow it anymore. We can walk down to the store, we can buy it. We don't have to kill an animal to eat it. And I'll be the first one to say, I've got chickens, and they're the luckiest chickens in the world because I'm not going to kill one to eat it.
Yep.
I mean, they're going to lay eggs for 3 years and they're going to live in retirement. But when we take these things out of society, there's people that don't know that hamburgers come from cows. I was talking to a gentleman, and he said his daughter said kids in his class didn't know that steak and hamburger came from cows. They think that it's made up in a shop somewhere. And when we stopped embracing truth and we stopped letting our children know the good and the bad, when you stop letting them know the bad, then they're naive, and then they're surprised and they're not ready to defend themselves against a conversation or a physical attack. So by sharing things with our kids in a responsible action, and let them know that bad things do happen and good things happen, and you can get over the bad things and you can enjoy the good things. And they want us to be a bunch of drones walking around just with no mindset whatsoever, and what they give us we accept, and what they don't give us we don't fight for.
Yeah, so the way I resolve it is, even with my cynicism, if we are in the end of days and we're going to keep moving in that direction, which we have since the beginning of time, starting with Adam and Eve, so be it. If I die in the battlefield, like the samurai say, you die fighting for what you believe in, that's a good death. I'm not afraid of that. So,
to die with honor and dignity is better to live in shame.
Yes. And how does the other saying go? I'd rather die for something than live for nothing, right? And I'm not going to live on my knees. And I did a post not too long ago and I posted a picture of, our Archangel Gabriel with a sword to a demon, and I just said, a lot of you've been so sanitized your brain that they'll take your freedom away completely and you'll be okay with it. I go, I'm not worried about it because I won't live that long. I will die fighting on my feet to prevent that. So I'm never going to live under somebody's knee, even though we are a little bit, we got to pay taxes and more taxes and more taxes. They do have a grip on us.
Taxes are biblical. So when you look at taxes, it's supposed to be the foreigners in the land paying the taxes. The people are the government's not supposed to be a burden on the people. The people are supposed to be a burden on the government. So the prince and princesses, the people that were born in that land, are never supposed to pay taxes. It's always supposed to be the foreigners. And when they originally came out with the tax code, which by the way, the IRS was implicated the same day as the Federal Reserve.
1913.
Yep, 13 entities. Bush's, Walker's, J.P. Morgan, all those people, all part of it. So our $2.7 tax bill, those people are getting, I think, 2.5% to 3% for taking a check and handing it over with the other hand.
Yeah.
And we can buy the Federal Reserve back. I think it's for $500 million or $500 billion. We can buy it back. And right now there's $7.5 trillion in there. So why don't we just take it back and then pay off part of our national deficit? And we always hear about our deficit, but we never hear about how much is owed to us as a country. So why don't we reconcile and say, okay, so this is what's owed to us. Here's what we owe. And let's get back to a zero balance both ways.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And why is it whenever there's a government shutdown, the foreign aid never stops? Our parks shouldn't be shut down. The things that we pay the taxes for should never be shut down. It should be, if the government's going to shut down, all the foreign programs stop. All the giveaway programs stop until this is resolved. And by the way, the congressmen and senators, not only do they not get their check, they're not doing their job. They should be actually looked at being fired. When you put out an application as a president, these are the things I'm running on, and you lie and don't do it, that should be lying on an application. You're removed. At least try to do what you're going to say. Don't blow smoke. Don't make these promises with things. There's a whole lot of things. Gosh, if I were king of the world, there'd be a whole lot of things that would change, but I'd probably become corrupt because then ultimate power corrupts absolutely.
That's the basic foundation of how I look at everything. To be a critical thinker, they say, critical thinkers know that all information has bias in it, right? And then we are subject to our own personal biases, and those biases don't open up our minds, right? So if we work to abandon our biases, then our minds open up more, and then we see more and we can process more.
And that's where faith comes in. When there's a higher power and man does not become autonomous, and you have a higher power, every legitimate religion was for the growth of their society. You know, when you look at biblically, the farmers didn't harvest the outside of their fields so that travelers would have food to eat. You know, you didn't need the polices. Everybody policed themselves. And, you know, you want a utopia, then let's get back to those things. But there's so much corruption in everything that we do. There's so much bastardization. There's no more sense of community. It's a sense of individual. Every single organism in the universe's goal is survival. You know, it's me or them. When you look at, you know, what they did with us with the vaccinations and the viruses incubate on average once per hour. So when they came out with a certain vaccine, it's only that certain strand of that virus, and an hour later it becomes less effective. Viruses' goals are survival, not killing its host. So it's going to mutate to become less lethal but more infectious to spread faster. And they got us to believe that this is an evil entity that's goal is to get worse and worse and worse. No, that's man's agenda. That's man modifying it to become worse and worse so that he can make money at it.
We've gone in the same direction with our research. And back to my number one bias, that every time I try to challenge that one bias so I become a better critical thinker and I challenge it, I grip onto it even harder. And that bias is man has great capacity to do evil. So everything that I think about that's going on around me, that back program is always running. I'm always aware of it. It doesn't necessarily push me in a direction or another, but it gives me that skepticism that everything I see, there's got to be a degree of deception in that. And then going back to the common enemy and how that brings people together, well, those common enemies are pretty much always invented by the controllers, right? They create a common enemy and then they get everybody's focus on the common enemy. So yeah, we'll be together so they can be doing the things on their agenda that are not to our benefit.
Well, think about the government, their solutions. So there's 26 solutions to something. They give us A and they give us Z. They don't give us all the ones in the middle. So the average productive citizen will be between M and P. And that would be the solution. They never give us those. They want to keep us divided because this is Barnum and Bailey's thing. You know, do something different with this hand, but watch this one. And this is what they want to do. As long as we're fighting with each other, we're not focusing on the government. And they can do whatever they want, and that's the legitimacy of it. You even see that with their views of corporations. Well, corporations are evil entities. They just want to do this. No, I'm sorry. A corporation's job is to make money for its shareholders. It's not to create jobs so you can look good as a president. It's not to do anything else. Their sole job is to make money for their shareholders. And when you look at the capitalism, you know, when they bastardize that and say, "Oh, capitalism bad," capitalism is the only way that anybody in any group of people in the world has made money that were not in the powers that control what their agenda was or their commodities. So. When you have capitalism and its core principles is actually for the growth of a society, not just an individual. And there's no other way for it to work. You know, when you look at socialism, you know, show me they're not greedy. They say capitalists are greedy. How are socialists not greedy? I mean, you look at they take everything from its people. A government that can and will take everything from its people can and will take everything from its people. You know, so when you allow them to do it, they're going to take everything from you, and you never get it back. We've seen that here with the tollways. Our roads are terrible.
Worst roads in the country, they say.
Yeah, and they take hundreds of millions of dollars a year. They were for schools and roads. The lottery was for schools and roads. I mean, how many hundreds of billions of dollars do they raise, and none of that stuff is fixed? We had a friend of ours that was high level in Chicago. This is going back maybe 15 years. Her dad was the black first congressman or senator. And they had got 5,000 computers for the Chicago public school system. 10 years later, they found them all in boxes unopened. I mean, this whole cycle of corruption, you know, man himself, nobody can be trusted. When you put anybody in a position of power and there's no checks and balances, doesn't matter if Democrat or Republican.
I agree.
If they keep us arguing, they can do everything that they want. And it used to be that you and I could disagree. If you're a Republican and I'm a Democrat, we could have a conversation. Okay, we both disagree, and we could go sit down and I'd say have a beer, but I don't drink, but would have a Coke. But we could sit down and be friends. Now it's like you've got to hate that other person. That other person's a toxin. that other person is the bane of existence. You need to eradicate them. And that's the mindset we need to stop. It is the haves versus the have-nots. The haves are the people in power, and they don't want to give up a single bit of it. That's why they have not only the income tax, but the wealth taxes. Or if you sell your house, some communities charge you a moving out tax.
Most of them in Illinois, you have to pay, they call them transfer stamps, right?
Yeah.
I'm paying you property tax every year, and then I got to pay you to sell my house, and I got to pay for that, and then I make a profit on my house, and I got to pay for that. It's like, it's
or
insane.
If you inherit it, your family's already paid the taxes. Why are farmers losing their land that they've had for generations because of tax issues? That property's been paid off over and over and over again. They don't have, they're not paying. In most towns or cities have taxes for, like, municipalities for their libraries. When's the last time you heard of anybody going to a library? Everything's online. I mean, so they put all these taxes on people on things that aren't even relevant anymore, and those should not be. And by the way, if you were in the military and you fought in a war, you should never have to pay income tax again. You should never have to pay property tax again.
Amen.
You shouldn't have to pay for anything. And if you were in the military when that happened, you still shouldn't have to pay income tax. Maybe property tax, fine, but these things, the government raping us on our wealth is horrible. It used to be you could get wealth through property. Now if my dad dies and I get an inheritance, they're taking a percentage of that, and they're taking a percent of the wealth of the property. That tax has been paid two or three times already.
Right.
And getting taxed on top of tax on top of tax. You realize that the Boston Tea Party was about a 3% tax
on one particular thing called tea, right? So, yeah. No, I'm with you. How do we get to Micronic Silver?
So our website is micronicsilver.com, and it's spelled MICRONIC, then silver, SILVER. And you can see our customers' testimonies there. Our products are 100% all natural, no chemicals in them. 100% made here in the United States, over in Elburn, Illinois. We make the product, we package it, we label it, we ship it. Nobody touches our product, so we can maintain the purity of the product. We're highly regarded by, again, Judy, Sherry, Brian, all the doctors we talked about here.
And formerly Zev Zelenko. Yeah. Awesome. We'll put all that information in the description of the video. It's been awesome. You're very knowledgeable. You've overcome dyslexia. Like, that's another whole story we can go into. We can do 10 other spinoffs on all the political things and healthcare systems we've talked about. So I'll finish with this last question, which I'd like to finish with. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, how happy and fulfilled are you in your life?
I'm over the moon. I mean, awesome. I would say, realistically, I'd have to say a 9, because there's always things that you could do. But when I take myself out of the equation and I go where God has me to go, I have no complaints whatsoever. And I'm just thankful and so blessed that He's taking care of me the way He is. This
is my book, How to Be a Warrior of Light in a Dark World. It's available on Amazon. It's about mindset and many other things. It's kind of a handbook on life. I have my second book coming called The Gift of Grief. That's at the editor right now, and that will be published probably within a month or two. So thank you all for joining the Warrior Podcast. Thank you to our sponsors. We'll see you at our next show. Awesome, brother. Well, Jeffrey Adam, thank you for being on the podcast. Let me shake your hand.
Yes, and let's get together again.
Yeah,
this is fun. This flew by. This feels like it was 10 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this podcast with Jeffrey Adam. Remember, there is a warrior inside us all. See you guys at our next podcast. Thank you, Jeff.